Val, you are
All right. Good morning, everybody. It's so nice to see all these faces that I work with throughout the year and the ones I got to know this past year from our recent fires. And I'm here to welcome you today and talk about how we work together as the, oh, now my phone's blowing up with people asking for links to the meeting. I'm just going to ignore that. um, so sorry about that, 3 people, but I don't think they're presenting. What I do is my job as the voluntary agency liaison for the California Office of Emergency Services is that I go into communities and after when a disaster strikes, most likely it'll be a wildfire. And and I know I mentioned it yesterday, I don't know if you were all here on the call yesterday, but my background, like 90% of my background for 25 years was working in nonprofit world. I was with Sacramento Region VOAD and also with Hands on Sacramento, which is the regional 4-county volunteer center in the Sacramento region. And I got to know a lot about disasters because Sacramento we don't really see disasters. I was deployed to help other communities in disasters and identify those community groups that needed to be at the table. So and I was also vice chair of NorCal VOAD. So when we go into a community, the first thing we do is see who our local partners are. I tend to look at places like a 211. If they have a 211, they know those local community partners. I also look for, I used to work under an umbrella agency and luckily that had a lot of programs under it. So I look for programs like that. And I was lucky to find in Plumas County, I discovered a very similar agency, Plumas Rural Services. And so when you identify those local partners first, you also look for a VOAD. Does that community have a voluntary organization active in disaster? Now, most of these rural communities do not. That's changing. And we've had a lot more come on board since 2020 when we had so many wildfires and NorCal VOAD, and I've been able to help with that too and starting up new VOADs. So we identify those community partners. There's the ones that are very, very local, the ones you want to really start working with, and that's those umbrella agencies, a VOAD, social services groups, just those initial players who are going to really be there for the long haul. We pull them together, we identify a leader and people that are initially going to want to pull those meetings together as the state. I don't want to have the heavy hand in it, but I want to have that supporting role. And then we bring those folks that we know from the outside, those super experienced people who've been there 100 times more than I have, that can come in and share their information. I reach out to a Kevin Cox or Steve Elliott, Steve Weiss, and others that really understand how a long-term recovery group is formed. I also have the support of the FEMA Val, and they have even a broader network from outside the state. So I actually have a list of voluntary groups that'll come to that table. And I see Jennifer Anders in there, so it's always good to have your local legal services program. And what I do is just support that community. And once we start, you work out the initial kinks and have that small meeting, and then we go to the larger meeting and we start inviting in our VOAD partners. I reach out to NorCal VOAD and announce the meeting date and invite people to come to the table. And we always talk about money, and they say manpower. I say people power, money, people power, and materials. That's who should be at your table. That's who are the ones who should help. The money is critical. People need to build back. They need to have their new normal. They need rental assistance. They need all kinds of things. So bringing those VOAD players to the table that can provide the money, the people power, who can help you rebuild, who's going to be there to support those homes that need to come back for the people who want to come back, and then materials. I haven't seen that one come into place yet this year. I guess I'm thinking of materials are those needs of the community. And Kevin and Steve interrupt if you have really seen what materials actually, is it different here in California, but what materials come to the table. I think of people materials and, forming the groups that go into our long-term recovery, the crisis counseling and the spiritual emotional care and initial disaster case managers, financial assistance. Those are people materials and financial materials that come in the very beginning. But we identify them, we bring them to the table. Usually the list can be like 50 to 100 people you see on those first meetings. Those are interested, trying to figure out where they fit. A year later, how many people are at your group? Maybe 10, 15, 20, 30. So, and those are the ones that come to the table, and they're going to be there for the long haul. And my job is to just find more players, help them find more people, because you are going to get tired. You've hit that 1 year mark, or you're getting close to that, and it's exhausting. So the other part of what I do is we're here to support you. We're here with anything. I'm an open book. Text me, call me, whatever you need. I'm here to help you solve problems. If you have had a bad day, give me a call. I bet we've all had we've all had one of those days. I'm just here to listen to you, hear you out, and help find more people to come to the table and help you, and grants. And we also have a philanthropy here at Cal OES. And we also have philanthropy at FEMA. So they also come to the table to help identify resources, find funding for all your needs. Rebuilding to right now, we're looking for funding for more spiritual emotional care programs. So there's a lot we can help bring to the table. So that's pretty much it. And today you're going to meet some of these wonderful groups that probably are in your community, and they can talk about what they're currently doing and what they can offer you for the long haul. So really, I just love seeing all your faces here. This is why I do this job, is to see all the good that comes to communities after such a horrific event. So I'm gonna, if anybody has any questions or anything to add, please feel free.
Well, thank you for that nice kickoff, Val. I know you were, it's a little switch on spot here, so appreciate you jumping in. Kevin, and we've got Kevin Cox and Steve Wise talking about volunteer group rebuilds, and Kevin's got a presentation, and I'm going to be quiet.
Thank you, Valerie. It is, as Valerie Mohanovich said, it's so good to see so many faces that we recognize and communities that Steve and I are blessed to work in. I'm going to be presenting on volunteer rebuilds, and that includes our good friends over at Mennonite Disaster Service. And I'm going to do about 10 minutes here and then allow 5 minutes for Steve. And then we're going to do 5 minutes of questions. Unfortunately, I have to leave after this presentation, so I won't be able to stick around for the question and answer in the panel. So feel free to drop a question into the drop box there, or the chat box, and Valerie Brown can read those off to us. So volunteer rebuilds, what we are very specific volunteer organizations. We are very disaster specific. We're disaster responders that respond to disasters pretty much whenever you see whether it's a wildfire or a flood or hurricane, tornado. Organizations like ours and Steve's respond, and our buddy Steve Elliott as well through United Methodist. We all respond to these, bringing in volunteers from all over. And so let me just briefly give you a quick description on how that works. And for some reason, Valerie, there we go. Most of the nonprofits that come in, there are independent disaster-related organizations that are 501c3s. If not, some of them work under a church denomination, which is still considered a nonprofit. Volunteers like ours and MDS, our volunteers come from all over North America. I know Steve's group has a very large contingency that comes from Canada. We have maybe 15-20% of our volunteers come from Canada as well. And the unique thing is that the volunteer organizations, we provide free labor to the long-term recovery programs. So basically what we're saying here is that we work for the LTRGs or the collaboratives. Collaborative has become a more popular term in the state of California. There is a difference between a recovery program, a long-term recovery program, and a collaborative. Most of the collaboratives, they will bring in economic development as well. In the LTRGs, what you'll basically be hearing about, and you probably heard about this yesterday, is we work through what's called unmet needs. And in our world, case managers, you are the unsung heroes in disaster response. The client starts with you and the client finishes with you. We come alongside you to help bring that rebuild part. And the way that would typically work is, let's say that you had a client that has a rebuild. Before you can do a presentation to your unmet needs, you need to get a hold of your volunteer organization that you're working with, and they need to go out and do a site visit on the property so they can give you a proper estimate of what it would cost to rebuild that house. You can't present a case and just pull a number out of the air. As we've seen materials fluctuate so drastically over the last couple of years, COVID has not been our friend, volunteer-wise and material-wise. We are looking, some of the materials that we've used in our home builds have gone up over 800%. Right now, I would say if you look at our builds pre-COVID versus post-COVID, you're looking that we're probably a good 110, 115% higher on the materials for those homes. All of the clients that we work with, they absolutely must come through the LTRG, and they must agree to have a case manager. The case manager needs to be doing the vetting of the client and doing all the background, answering all the questions. And then if you feel that this is a client that qualifies for a rebuild, then you would get to approval through your supervisor, and then you'd reach out to us. In the state of California, all volunteer organizations are required to have a contractor's license. It used to be Steve's group and ours, we all used to work under the owner build. We can do that in 49 other states. We cannot do that in the state of California. And so we were all put in a very difficult position about a year ago. And we had to act fast because the state of California used to allow us to do that. But then they determined that even though we provide free services, the value of our service became higher than $500, which we all knew. But just to give you a rough idea, everyone thinks, okay, well, the volunteer organizations are there, they'll do it for us. But you have to understand, as part of the unmet need, we are also like grantors. The labor that we provide in these houses can equate anywhere from $150,000 to $175,000 in labor, and that includes our subcontractors. So here's real quickly the homeowner qualifications. They must be a homeowner, must be their primary residence. Property taxes and income taxes must be current. They must have a clear title to their property or owe less than $20,000. Now, not all organizations put that $20,000 amount in there. There are some organizations that will require that they must own the property 100%. That's something that each organization, and you'll need to check in with that group, because when MDS comes in, MDS may have a slightly different model that they work with. We all have standards in the disaster world within we work in through our VOAD. And we all use those standards, but they can also add a few of their own in there. So be very cautious. Make sure that you talk to the volunteer organization. They must meet income limits, and I'm going to show those to you in just a moment. Must be able to maintain the property, insurance, and taxes. This has become a real problem in the state of California because many of the families that we are rebuilding for lost their property or lost their insurance. A lot of insurance companies stopped writing in California. I will tell you though, we are also building up in Happy Camp, and I'll give you an example. Many of those that wanted to get insurance had to go through the FAIR plan. Last year, we were quoted $2,500 for our builder's risk policy. That builder's risk policy would only be about $480 for the year on those properties. We are now starting to see those coming back down into a reasonable price. I will tell you, in Paradise, We have several homeowners that cannot get their insurance for less than $13,000 a year. How is that sustainable? It is not. And it becomes very challenging. So we have to look at all these difficult decisions. Sometimes we have to say no, because if we can't build a home for someone who's not able to care for it, and we're not going to put these homeowners in that situation of disappointment. And the other thing is that I really hope that you hear me loud and clear when I say this. Please never speak on behalf of another organization. You may think you know, but you may not know at all. And we've had case managers over the years, and Steve can attest to this. Hope Crisis or MDS, they'll build a house for you. We don't know that. We don't know that we can. We have to go through those the checklists and make sure that the families do qualify. So be very intentional. Manage that expectation for your homeowner when you're doing this. Priority is given to elderly, low-income families, veterans, single-parent families, widows. These policies they're there because we really do, and you'll hear this word a lot: vulnerable population. We're here to help those that are just not able to help themselves. In many communities, you're going to hear about the Cal Home loans. The Cal Home loan has become the lifeline in many of these rural communities. It's a grant program that our friends at Mennonite Disaster Service use as well as we do. And it's enough money there to pay for the materials on the home, but it helps us to get the families back home. And it's, I know from our agency, we've responded to 58 wildfires in the last 6 years. And I know Steve's group has done an awful lot as well. And money is very hard to come by in the state of California right now in the long-term recovery programs. So that's why it's so important to these Cal homes that are available. Here's just an example of what a moderate income would look like. This is at 120% AMI. This is the income examples. This is the USDA guidelines that we use. Most disaster organizations do the same, but not all. And so you look at what the families would, the requirements. So for example, at 120, if a single family individual can earn up to 61,400. Now, we're very loose with that. Many of these state programs or other organizations, you look at 61,400 and that's set in stone. Well, those are guidelines. And so sometimes you can extend it a little bit. In other parts of the country, that 120% AMI in some of these communities is down around $35,000 for a single individual. So it's quite challenging depending on where you're at. This is what a typical rebuild would look like. This is a small 2-bedroom, 2-bath. Our models are very similar to what our friends at Mennonite Disaster Service use. This house right now can vary in price. It's all over the board. It can be anywhere from 110 to 130,000. But the unique thing in most of the cases we do, it comes with heating and air conditioning. We put all the appliances in the home, as well as a washer and dryer. But in some cases where we are required to do sprinklers, in some communities we're not. So again, it really varies depending on where you go. This is a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. And this is a model that we use at HCRN. And I know that Steve's got some other models that are quite beautiful as well. These are the more popular of the homes, the 3-2, but homes, whether it's a 2-2 or 3-2, that is going to be decided upon the qualification of the individuals. If they are a family of 2, they wouldn't qualify for a 3-2. They would get a 2-2. If it's a family that has, multiple children and need multiple bedrooms, then you go to the larger home. I'm going to stop there. These are some of the partners that we work with in Northern California. We cannot do the work we do without these partners. FEMA and Cal OES, they're always at the table. Our buddy John Chavis is on the call, and you got to hear him yesterday. We have the opportunity to go into communities like yours to help you establish your long-term recovery committees, and then we stay all the way through the rebuilds. So, Steve, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Kevin. Couple of things that I'd add. Before a volunteer group can work in your community, we've got to have a place for our volunteers to stay. Sometimes we stay in like a church because they usually have a nice place to cook and meet. But a lot of communities won't allow us if there's no fire sprinklers in the building and have to have two means of egress. We're in accommodations, we're looking for a space for up to 40 volunteers to sleep, private rooms for leadership, a nice kitchen to feed the group, and a place to eat and meet. Our volunteer groups that do rebuilding, we're not a custom home builder. If there's somebody that wants to replace the house that they had, a 3,000 square foot $1 million home, and they were underinsured, and it needs volunteer group to get them over the hump, we can't do that. We're going to offer our basic house. If we help somebody build a big fancy house, that would mean that 2 or 3 other families wouldn't get a house. So what we'll tell people, if you want what we have to offer, we're in business. Mennonite Disaster Service has been around for over 70 years, operate in US and Canada, but we don't have the capacity to respond to every disaster. There are just too many now. And COVID has hurt our volunteer pool a bit. So at this point, we are limiting to one major project on the West Coast at a time. Say a major project that would build 5 or 10 houses in a year. And right now we're committed to Paradise, and we will be working there until something changes. Like Kevin said, we provide labor and rely on the long-term recovery group to provide the money for materials, which can run from $100,000 to $200,000 per house. And that's going to vary a lot on the local conditions for materials, subcontractors, and permits. We rely on the case managers to introduce us to clients. We don't drive around town and look for people. The case managers dig into it, and they know who's at the greatest need and who, what kind of resources they have. And so we rely on that connection. So that's all I have. Ready for questions?
Thank you, Steve, for bringing the housing up. And the point is that, you know, again, both of our organizations pretty much operate very similar in what we do. And everything that you have heard from the two of us kind of goes back and forth for each of these groups. As I mentioned, there's only 2 organizations that are currently building in the state of California, and that's Mennonite Disaster Service and Hope Crisis. We all have our limits and capacity, and we are in discussions with other groups that potentially can come to bear. We don't have anything firm at this point, but we know that each of your communities have needs, and we're doing our absolute very best to be able to serve the communities. We just cannot make a commitment to come in and not be able to fulfill it. And you know, and you heard Steve talk about, you know, they're only doing 1 right now. That's because that's what capacity is allowing, because they use a lot of Amish and Mennonite volunteers that come from the Midwest, and it's tough traveling right now. It really is. So Valerie Brown, I'll open it up for any questions there may be, and then if not, then I'm going to sign off.
Yeah, let me see if we have any questions. I don't see any. I see lots of kudos to both of you, so thank you for that. Just to reiterate, you know, what both Steve and Kevin said, that this is a resource that's scarce in our state, and it takes a lot of planning and prep to be able to pull it off. So don't go into your case management and long-term recovery group efforts thinking you're going to get a volunteer rebuild without a lot of homework and a lot of working with either of these agencies to see if it's even feasible. It's just, there's a lot to it, and they've given a very detailed overview, but it's just complicated. So it's a great resource. We want to have more of it. I will say for both Kevin and Steve, any pressure your community can give for like CDBGR to say, why can't we use our volunteer rebuild dollars to help with something? Use this for volunteer rebuilds. That would be helpful to be able to bring some state dollars in there. I'm not advocating to, protest at the Capitol, but I'm saying if you have those opportunities, make that ask of, well, could we use these dollars for that when it comes open in your community?
I did see a question there from Mark, and Mark asked, how will the inflation impact the ability to provide services? Well, again, with the volunteer services, they're there. They're not going to, when we're committed to be there, we're committed to be there. The materials, as you're aware, they fluctuate so much. And so that's why the importance, Mark, why we require the case managers to work directly with us to get those estimates. And an estimate is more than just the building. We have to go out and look at, is there a working septic? Is there water? Is there, the electric? And so a lot of those costs really fluctuate. So since many of us don't do like septic, for example, if a septic system fails, we have to use a subcontractor. And we have that's an area that we've seen where a lot of the peaks and valleys have come into play when we look at the cost of building materials. The subcontractors are, they are a for-profit type of work, and we don't have any fluctuation over that. The materials, I said, we have seen them go up as high as 800% on some items. Currently, we're probably looking more around that 300%. We have no control. And so when we give an estimate to the case manager, that estimate is only as long as our lumber partners or our material partners allow us. There was a point in our rebuilds where we were only giving prices were only good for 3 days. So, and that's very difficult for a case manager to present to the unmet needs committee, because they'll get the information from us and it may be 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks before they present their case, and the prices have gone up again. So, case managers, on the day before you present to your unmet needs committee, please get back to the rebuild organizations to reconfirm your prices. And Mark, you brought up a really great point there, and it's very important to make sure that we can deliver on those goods. Steve?
Yeah, inflation is going to be with us probably for a while. I watch the commodities exchange every day, and lumber prices are stable at this point. Copper is actually coming down. Oil is involved in everything, and it's up. Interest rates, I think, have an impact, are going to slow construction, which is going to put price pressure going down. So I think it's a mixed bag. What we're doing now is, once we put together an estimate, we will put in a 10 to 20% contingency. Yeah, it depends on the risks and the unknowns.
Yeah, we do that as well, Steve. And one last question here from Kelly. Do you find that the subcontractor will volunteer their time? No, it's a lot of organizations, a lot of communities, long-term recovery committees think, oh, well, we'll get all this volunteer labor from our contractors. You have to remember that there are those that have money that can rebuild, and they're hiring contractors and they're doing the work. What I will tell you is that we see subcontractors giving us better prices than what they would typically give someone who is fully insured. So we do work with the contractors the best we can. We stick with those that we really love and trust, and do a great job on behalf of the clients. And the last thing I just want to point out to you is that, who would you like building for you? A for-profit contractor company that comes in and their guys are paid by the hour, and all they do is just rush, or organizations that will come in and really take the time to get to know the homeowners, to love on the homeowners. For groups like Steve and ours, and even our buddy Steve Elliott at United Methodist, we get to build the houses, but we are called to see the restoration of the individuals that we work with. And our purpose there is providing that relationship and walking these families through the journey We have them to our camps for dinner throughout the week and enjoy the relationship. And so through that process, we really work through the mental health of the individuals as well. So those are all important things that we work through. And so Valerie, I don't see anything else. I'm going to stop there. And I wish you all the very best. Again, remember, case managers, learn from the best practices. You've got a lot of really great people on the call here that can teach you some wonderful things. Remember, never speak on behalf of another organization. Let that organization let those organizations speak for themselves, because I hate to see you get yourself in a little bit of trouble for speaking on behalf of someone else. Valerie, anything else?
Thank you, Kevin and Steve, for sharing that information with us. Next up, we have Jennifer Andrews-Gable with Legal Services of Northern California.
Thanks, Valerie. I don't have any fancy slides, but I will put in the chat a link to our website that also has a link to our disaster flyer, which happens to have one of those fancy QR codes that sometimes people like to post in their waiting rooms or whatnot. But I am Jennifer. I am an attorney with Legal Services of Northern California. I know several of you, and I don't know a lot of you as well. I am housed within a legal aid organization, and for, I don't know where everyone's coming from. I'm sorry, I wasn't on yesterday's call. So for folks throughout the state, everyone should know that, well, throughout the country, really, everyone should know that every organization, every county is covered by some legal aid provider. That's generally someone, a nonprofit providing some level of free legal services, generally to low income folks, typically with housing benefits, health work. Throughout California, a lot of the legal aid providers are handling various levels of disaster legal services, though the extent of their assistance varies depending upon what region you're in. For most of you on the phone, just so you know, Legal Services of Northern California covers 23 Northern California counties. So we cover basically from Sacramento to the Oregon border, all the way to the north, and then to the east, you know, the whole Sierras, and to the west, everything except for the Bay Area. So up to Solano County, but then we cover the coast north of the Bay Area. And generally we help folks, again, who typically lower income individuals, older adults, folks over the age of 60, and others with a variety of issues related mostly to securing housing, securing public benefits, securing and maintaining healthcare. But then as it relates to the disasters which keep happening in our service area is home to most of these major wildfires over the last several years. We've really dived in more than we had in previous years, since so many of our clients are affected with the many legal issues that arise in the days and the weeks and the months and the years after a disaster or after a wildfire. And that's not always intuitive to the survivor or to the folks helping survivors when to get a lawyer involved. You usually don't think of a disaster and think, oh, I need a lawyer. But as so many of you know, unfortunately, it often feels like it's one issue after another when you're helping disaster survivors. And there's a lot to kind of navigate and understand. And so just to kind of give some context on or some examples about where we might be able to help, or where it might be worth, you know, having a lawyer review or a lawyer help, are the issues where folks are don't understand and notice that they received or are being denied something. So for example, a lot of things we help with in the first few months relate to various benefit programs. As a lot of you know or will learn, there are a lot of special benefits that the state and or federal government make available after a disaster. So that could be emergency or replacement CalFresh or food stamp benefits. That could be disaster unemployment insurance. Of course, that is FEMA benefits for the fires or disasters where that's applicable. And all those things have eligibility requirements. And that means that some folks will either be confused about applying if they're even eligible. So that's something we can help explain the rules to. Or what we see more often than not is they're denied one of these benefits, or maybe months or years later they're told you were paid the benefit, but you actually weren't eligible. Now you're overpaid and you owe us money. All those kind of circumstances are ones where we certainly get involved. And we usually, a lot of it is just helping the individual understand what the letter says or what the denial means. And then often it's coming up with the necessary proof to disprove. A lot of times the individual didn't supply enough information to, help FEMA understand that they were in fact eligible. Or what's common in like the disaster unemployment benefit cases is maybe somebody's income was selling things on eBay, and everything that they used to sell was now destroyed. And it's about getting their old eBay records or something to prove that they had that income that they've now lost. And so we help with all those kind of benefit claims. We also do a lot with housing issues. Initially, that's a lot of landlord-tenant issues, a lot of individuals uncertain about their rights as far as whether they should pay rent, whether they get their security deposits back, when and if it's safe to move in or to return to the house if it wasn't, or apartment if it wasn't completely destroyed. A lot of issues with mobile homes. There's a lot of rights that get confusing, whether they own the mobile home, whether they didn't, working with the park owners, when it's safe to come back, if they're ever allowed to come back. And a lot of title issues with mobile homes, a lot of title issues in general. And this comes up a lot with FEMA applications and other benefits. Is you need to prove that you lived somewhere or that you owned something. And that's hard to do if the title to what you thought you owned was never in your name or was never clear. Or what we see a lot is individuals who lived on properties that they inherited, but the title was never transferred or cleared, or maybe there was a will, but that was destroyed. Those are all the kind of legal issues that we help with, or we have a crew of pro bono attorneys who help us with some of the more complex estate planning issues that isn't otherwise part of our ordinary practice. And then months down the road, we help individuals with the various rebuilding scams or different kind of scams that may be happening in the community, different issues related to the rebuilding process, sometimes issues with contractors or with contracts, and even months or many more years out. For example, the campfire survivors, we're getting a lot of calls about the PG&E settlements, and stuff along those lines, where there's uncertainty about how those benefits will, or how the settlement from that lawsuit will affect their public benefits or their Medi-Cal eligibility or their SSI. And so those are real concerns, and there's legal consequences to how they take the money or what they do with those funds. So we help early on when we're at the disaster recovery centers with a lot of you, years out to these issues keep popping up, and just when you think that you've cleaned everything up and shored everything away, it seems like something else from that fire or that disaster somehow is causing you a problem. And like I said, so we do that in person a lot. We do a lot of our services by phone. Like I said, we have this 23 county, mostly rural service area. So helping folks by phone has always been something we did a lot of. It's not just a pandemic thing, but that makes it really easy for us to connect with folks and our partners that we already have. We do a lot more Zoom presentations than we ever did. We're happy to come out and do in-depth presentations on any of these sort of legal issues, either for you or for your clients, individuals who might want to just know a little bit more about their rights about some of these topics. We have, again, some pro bono attorneys who do everything completely free with us, that they'll help give some presentations too on some of these other issues that we don't handle as much. And I mentioned just the eligibility stuff is always important. Well, we help anyone who's low income. So that's if you're under 200% of the federal poverty level, and I can link that in there. But then we also have grants to help anyone over the age, not grants, grants, anyone over the age of 60 throughout our service area. And then we also do receive periodically, depending upon the times and the disasters, special funding to help individual disaster survivors. So we wind up being able to help most folks who call us, at least with advice and counsel. We might not be able to appeal to FEMA for every single person, though we certainly try to prioritize those kind of cases. But kind of like the last presentation, we have to prioritize our limited resources too. So we try to at least give advice and counsel to everyone who call us, and then more full representation for the folks who really need it and wouldn't otherwise be able to either get the benefit they're trying to access, or certainly unlikely to get any sort of legal support. There's just not a lot of lawyers in rural parts of the state or rural parts of the country, really. And a lot of the disaster stuff is still new to a lot of individuals too. But as many of you know, that's a growing, disaster legal services is a growing body, and we're connected with folks throughout the state doing this work and throughout the country. I see there's stuff in the chat. I'll go down there to see if there's any questions, and I'll take any questions as well. Looks like just comments.
I think you've got a lot of kudos there.
Yeah.
And I just want to reiterate that, it's so lovely having you as the provider for this, all of these impacted communities, so that, that way you're able to track trending issues, and and you guys are doing a great job. So I just want to echo those kudos. And then for anyone else in the group outside of this area, I put in the chat a link where you could find in your community who would be providing those legal services. So thank you so much, Jennifer. And
Thanks.
I don't see that Jenny Campbell has joined us yet. So we are going to keep moving, and Sidra Goldwater with Fannie Mae will be presenting next.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
You should be able to share your screen, yeah.
Next, let me share my screen. This is.
And thank you so much for making time with us, Sidra.
Oh, sure. Okay, next. Okay, let me start. Slideshow. Great. So just a little bit about who I am and who Fannie Mae is. So my name is Sidra Goldwater. I'm an advisor on our disaster recovery and rebuilding team for Fannie Mae. And so folks may or may not know who Fannie Mae is. We are the largest purchaser of mortgages, both single family and multifamily in the country. So basically we own about 1 in 4 single family homes and about 25% of the multifamily housing stock. We don't deal directly with homeowners. We deal with lenders. So, we're in this weird space where, we have a lot of influence in the mortgage space, but we don't actually deal with individuals. And so one of the things that is important about who owns your loan, and it's not necessarily who you make your payment to each month, but who ultimately owns that loan, is they make the rules for how that loan is sort of managed. And so the requirements that I'm going to be talking to you about are Fannie Mae's. They're actually aligned with Freddie Mac, and so they're our sort of brother or sister company, and they are slightly smaller than us, but between the two, we're called government-sponsored entities or GSEs, but between the two companies, we basically have almost half of the housing stock in the country. So what that means is that most lenders follow our requirements just so that they, homeowners have one sort of user experience, that they're not treating folks differently. In terms of who is the disaster response and rebuild team, well, we were set up by Fannie Mae to really be sort of that boots on the ground team after Hurricanes Harvey, Irma, and Maria. So it was a very active year a few years ago in terms of both, hurricanes, but also the Camp Fire. And so there was viewed as a need to sort of establish local partnerships with communities impacted by disasters to see if our policies were working the way they were intended to, and really figure out like what can we take back in terms of that real world and experience to figure out how can we, incorporate those into our strategies for making homes more resilient in terms of mitigating and just helping folks overall. So the first topic I'm going to talk about is insurance proceeds. And so most folks have no idea that their lender is going to be on the check until, they get that insurance check, and they're like, why? And so the reason why your lender name is on the check is because you have a mortgage, and the mortgagor has an interest in making sure that property is rebuilt. And so, one of the key things is, I get a lot of questions about is, well, when you say rebuilt, like, do I have to build exactly the same home again? No, it needs to be sort of like value. So if you had a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home, we're expecting a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home to be rebuilt. Does it have to be blue? Does it have to look exactly the same? No, but can you put a tiny home on the property instead of a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home? That is something we would frown upon, because it needs to be of similar value, because that's the collateral that's protecting the mortgage. The second question I get a lot, and I'm going to talk about this, is do I need to pay off the loan? And so you do not need to pay off your mortgage. That's going to sound very strange coming from a mortgage company. We do want to, and you'd eventually pay it off, but you're, looking. But when a homeowner has had a, loss, particularly a total loss scenario, they do not need to pay it off. They can take something called a forbearance, and I'll talk about that a little bit. But one of the key things is, one of the issues, if you do pay off the loan and you do want to rebuild, is it becomes much harder because, one, you need to get a construction loan, which is much harder to get. You're most likely right now looking at much higher interest rates than what that homeowner previously had. So if they had a 2.5% to 3% interest rate because they locked in a few years ago, they're now looking at over 5%. So it's really, really important that if you do, and I was saying you don't have to, the homeowner does not need to pay off their mortgage if they don't want to rebuild. But if somebody is looking to rebuild, I would highly encourage them to not pay off. And so what happens to the insurance proceeds if the loan is not paid off? Well, they'll be held in an interest-bearing account. The servicer will reach out to, and when I say servicer, they're sort of the lender portion of the mortgage company. I apologize, I speak mortgagee, but they're the ones who manage the loan after closing. And that servicer is going to want to make sure, as I said, that sort of basically that a like home is being put on it. They're going to want to review the repair plan. They're going to require inspections throughout the process to make sure that there's progress being made on the repair or rebuilding the home. And they'll make disbursements to the homeowner based on the loan's delinquency status at the time of the disaster event. So if the loan was current when the disaster event, and most likely in California, we're talking about wildfire, you proceeds less than $40,000. So for example, if there's just smoke damage, can probably just be released in one payment. If there was more than $40,000 in damage, that's when they're going to have to monitor those repairs. And so what will happen is those funds will basically get dispersed in increments of a third, with an inspection in between each release. One of the things, not for total loss, but for smaller losses, we do allow remote inspections, and that became a big thing, obviously, with COVID. Probably will continue to be a big issue, but it's one of those things we do allow for remote inspections. Now, if the loan was delinquent at the time of the event, we are much more conservative in terms of how insurance proceeds can be released. And so if the damage is small, less than $5,000, it can be released as one payment. But if it was more than $5,000, we're going to require that those disbursements be made in chunks of basically $10,000. We're also going to require that the homeowner be reviewed for a workout to make sure that they can go back to making their mortgage payment. And I'll talk more about our workout hierarchy later in the presentation. So I mentioned the word forbearance a little bit ago. And so folks may or may not be familiar with forbearance. A lot more folks are familiar with forbearance after COVID. We did close to 1 million or over 1 million forbearances at the height of COVID. So this is definitely something folks are much more familiar with. And so what a forbearance is, it's a period of time where the homeowner does not need to make a payment. And that's not that they don't, never need to make a payment, but it's basically giving them sort of breathing room to figure out what is next. And as I said, with the insurance proceeds, there's a lot of information coming at, a lot of decisions a homeowner needs to make. This is basically a time to figure out, will my insurance proceeds be enough? What is the gap? Will I qualify for an SBA loan or FEMA assistance or other assistance out there? This is basically a time for the homeowner to figure out if they can rebuild and then to start rebuilding. Another reason somebody might want to take a forbearance is they may not know how much, additional living expenses they'll be getting. So they may not know if they can continue to make that mortgage payment for that period of time. So one of the key things I do want to say is that during the forbearance period, no late charges will accrue, and that the homeowner does not need to provide any documentation. So it's basically, it can be, forbearance can be approved and offered through a phone call. After COVID, a lot of lender servicers set up portals on their websites for this. So there are different ways to sort of attest to the hardship. So in terms of how long the forbearance is, so the initial forbearance can be up to 6 months. Most servicers prefer to offer forbearance in smaller chunks, such as 3 months. And that's fine. You could do say 3 and 3. And the reason a servicer wants to offer a shorter forbearance is that they want, that homeowner still needs to make up those missed payments. So they want to reduce the amount of delinquency as much as possible. The initial forbearance can be extended for an additional 6 months, so up to 12 months. And as I said, it can be shortened at any time. If somebody realizes, oh, I can get back in, or I can start making payments after 5 months or 10 months, they can. And then the last thing I'll state is that the forbearance plan, the terms of the forbearance, have to be sent to the homeowner in a written format. So it's very clear what everyone has agreed to, and there's no misunderstandings. So what should a homeowner do after a forbearance? So one, they should be in contact with their servicer, let them know where they're at, if they need extension, if they're ready to, either go back to making their payment, if they can pay off, where they're at in terms of going back to being able to make a payment, their payment, or if they need additional assistance in terms of a workout solution. So this is a sort of a lot of information in this graphic. So this is our evaluation hierarchy. And so basically it goes from sort of least intrusive to the most intrusive or worst case scenario in terms of what can happen with a homeowner. So we start with repayment plan, disaster payment deferral, our modification program, and then the options if somebody is underwater and does want to not rebuild. So the first one is a repayment plan, and this is probably, you know, most folks probably understand this, what this is pretty quickly. This is where somebody can, you know, sort of make a payment plus a little bit more to catch up on that delinquent amount. These are generally best if it was a very short, you know, forbearance or, you know, period of time where somebody didn't make it to like a month or two. This doesn't make sense if, you know, somebody has been on a forbearance for say 12 months. Obviously, that's just, we realize that's not realistic. And again, this is only if somebody can go back to be making their previous payment. The next option is our disaster payment deferral. And folks may be familiar with this concept as well. Basically, what it happens is all the deferred payments are basically due and payable when the loan is paid off. So that could be, you know, in a couple years if somebody refinances. It could be, you know, 20 plus years down the road if somebody, you know, pays, you know, through the full term. But it's all those payments will be placed in sort of a non-interest bearing balloon that's due on payoff. One of the key things is the terms of loan are not going to change. This is not a modification. So if you were 25 years into your 30-year mortgage, you'll still be 25 years into your 30-year mortgage. Again, a written agreement will be sent to the homeowner, laying out all the terms, et cetera. And then in terms of who is eligible for a payment deferral, well, you have to have been either current or less than 2 months delinquent as of the disaster event. And you need to be at least 1 month or less than 12 months delinquent at the time of evaluation. And you could not have previously received a payment deferral for the same disaster. So if somebody, for example, with COVID, got a payment for deferral for COVID, they would still be eligible for a payment deferral for a disaster. God forbid, if somebody was experienced 2 separate natural disasters, they would be qualified for both those natural disasters. So the next workout I'm going to talk about is our flex modification. And this is our, and when I say ours, I'm also talking about Freddie Mac. This is our standard modification product. We do offer for disaster impacted communities, or somebody who's been impacted, I shouldn't say communities, but somebody who's been impacted by a natural disaster. We sort of remove a lot of our, criteria in terms of who is eligible. Basically, if you've been impacted by a natural disaster and you cannot afford to go back to be making your payment, you will be evaluated for a flex modification. And if that modification results in a payment that is less than what you're currently paying, that homeowner would qualify for it. And so what happens here is all the arrearages are capitalized into a new loan balance. The term is extended by 480 months, and that helps provide payment relief. But we also look at sort of a hierarchy of things where, depending on the loan to value, we may be able to provide additional payment relief through a forbearance at the, again, sort of that non-interest bearing balloon that would be paid off when the loan is, when the loan comes due, which is a payoff, or when the loan is sold. So who is qualified? I said, basically, as long as the loan is delinquent and will provide payment relief, if somebody is less than 3 months delinquent, we will require a borrower response package or documentation. However, if they're more than 3 months delinquent, which is generally what happens after forbearance, we do not require any documentation for that loan to be evaluated. Now, I talked about sort of the more, these are circumstances, short sale and mortgage release or deed in lieu, where basically someone may be underwater, they may not want to rebuild. And this is a set of circumstances where this may make sense. So a short sale is basically where we allow the sale of the home for less than what is due on the mortgage. The borrower may be required to make a financial contribution. However, they will receive a deficiency waiver, which leaves them of being responsible for paying any of the remaining loan balance. A deed in lieu, very similar, is that basically where the homeowner transfers the property to a lender, thereby avoiding foreclosure and that credit impact of foreclosure. Again, the homeowner may need to make a financial contribution, but they would receive that deficiency waiver. So the last couple of things I want to talk about are some of the resources Fannie Mae has for disaster impacted community. The largest item we have is our disaster response network. And so what this was, we set this up, as I said, sort of after a couple of years ago, when we realized that there's really not a lot of case management out there at a national basis. A lot of folks may have access to stuff locally, but we really wanted to make sure that, regardless of where you were in the country, including Puerto Rico, folks had access to case management. So we partnered with Money Management International. They are a nonprofit organization that is HUD certified and has HUD approved counselors to basically set up a holistic case management team just targeted towards disaster. So a lot of HUD certified counselors, they may not know how to deal with FEMA. They may not know how to deal with SBA. MMI, the Disaster Response Network, knows how to, file FEMA appeals, as well as deal with SBA denials, all that kind of stuff. They can hop on a tri-party call if somebody has a question with their lender. One of the key things is that this is at no cost to the homeowner or renter, and so a lot of all the requirements I was just talking about only apply to homeowners. The Disaster Response Network is available both to homeowners and renters. Initially, it was only available to Fannie Mae homeowners and renters. MMI was able to secure additional funding and basically can offer the services for 18 months, basically to anyone. If this is the number for the Disaster Response Network, if folks are interested in it. One of the other things I will share is that one of the things that MMI has done in the past is partnered with local case managers, particularly if there is sort of resource constraints. They can do sort of warm handoffs one way or the other in terms of if folks may be better served by having a local, sort of that hand-holding locally, but may need some additional assistance in terms of the long term. They can establish that where homeowners or renters are sort of, I don't want to say traded back or forth, but that there's that relationship between the two organizations. The other key thing is that when you do call into MMI, you will get the same case manager throughout. So that homeowner does not, or renter does not need to explain every single month their situation. That housing counselor will know where they're at and what they are, and they'll be able to work with them to give them a list of items to work through each month and help them check them off. And then the last resource I wanted to share is Fannie Mae's KnowYourOptions.com website. This is Fannie Mae's consumer, homeowner, renter-facing website. I throw out a lot of language. I always say I speak mortgage. One of the good things about this website is that it explains things in more sort of common language. It's geared towards homeowners and renters. There's a lot of information there about all the workout offerings I talked about insurance proceeds, etc. And with that, I will stop sharing if I can figure out how to stop sharing. And I apologize, I did not monitor the chat because I was sharing my screen. So I'm not sure if there are questions.
Yeah, I think we have one question for you. If someone lost their business only but is struggling with mortgage on their home that survived, would they qualify for forbearance?
They would. That's a great question. So it's both if their place of income, their job or their home was impacted. So any either situation. There are also forbearances if you just lost your job. So I would say if something bad happens, call your your lender and explain the set of circumstances. There's a lot of stuff that they can do for you.
Thank you. And thank you so much for your time, Sidra.
Sure.
And so just really quickly, because I know Sidra's going to have to hop off, are there any other questions about Fannie Mae? Obviously, we'll make sure you have a copy of the presentation. We'll make sure you have links to the Know Your Options.
Exactly. Yep. All right. Thank you all.
All right. Thank you. Well, Jim Huey is up next for NorCal VOAD. And Jim, take it away.
Thanks a lot, Valerie. I don't know how many of you that are on the call understand what VOAD is. It stands for Volunteer Organization.
Jim, you accidentally, there we go.
Yeah, sorry, my computer's too sensitive. Can't deal with sensitive people these days, or a computer. But for those of you that don't know what VOAD is, it stands for Volunteer Organizations Active in Disaster. If you go up on YouTube and type in VOAD 50-year anniversary, our national office did a really nice 9-minute video that gives a great overview of why VOAD was started and who all is involved in it. But bottom line, since the late 60s, early 70s, all of our disaster responses with VOAD, California Office of Emergency Services, the National Incident Management System, all these things have come into play in the aftermath of a disaster because people didn't know how to talk to each other or even work with each other. So VOAD was founded with looking at 4 C's: cooperation, communication, coordination, and collaboration. So we want our partners to cooperate with each other and to cooperate with government agencies. You work alongside sometimes with your local emergency manager or your local police department or local fire department that is looking for resources, and they know who you are. And so they reach out to you. Communication, you've got to be talking to people. You've got to be reaching out. We, on our NorCal VOAD, which is the 48 northern counties of California, we do regular emails. If any of our partners have a need, they can send us an email with their need, how much they need, when they need it, who the contact person is, and then we put that out to our entire email list so that one of our partners can reach out and say, hey, I can meet that need, or I can meet part of that need, or whatever, so that we coordinate that. And that's the other part, coordination. How do we provide those services? How do we give people what they need? We were running a distribution site during the Paradise Fire. The local fire chief or fire inspector came in. He needed to set up a temporary shelter for some first responders that were coming in. We provided him with cots, blankets, and pillows. Then he came back and he said, hey, I keep running into people that have run out of gas, and can you guys help me out? So we gave him cash to help people get gas and said, hey, just bring us back some great stories. And we worked with a lot of different agencies to make sure that people were getting what they needed. And then collaboration. To me, collaboration and cooperation and coordination, they're all very similar, but it's really important to know who the different groups are that are serving. And it was really good to see Jennifer on today from Disaster Legal Services. And as she was sharing, I was thinking about, I was in Biloxi, Mississippi, following Hurricane Katrina. And I got called into a neighborhood where there were a lot of working poor people. And all of a sudden they were being given eviction notices. And they were being given eviction notices because the state of Mississippi was changing their laws that all the casinos that were on barges could now be rebuilt on land. And so landlords were trying to evict people so that they could build a casino and make a bunch of money. And so I get called to this neighborhood. I'm meeting with the people that live there, and they don't know what to do. And I said, well, let me go over here to a place. It was called Yankee Stadium. FEMA was there. Mississippi State Bar had a representative there. And I sat down with him and told him what was going on. He started to tell me what to do. And I pointed to my clergy collar and I said, you see the collar? I am not a lawyer. So what do these people need to bring to you so that you can tell them what to do and I'll be their chaplain? He went, oh, okay. So he told me what they needed. This was in September, and they were supposed to be out by September. I came back in February and all those people were still there, because all any of them needed to do was to provide to the legal aid a copy of their rental agreement. And so that's really important to know who's on the ground, who provides what services. And something I learned 5 years ago, I did the Executive Academy from FEMA for emergency management. Best class of the course was called How to Avoid the Wicked Problems. And wicked problems occur when you operate based on how you think things work. Gets you in trouble. So you avoid the wicked problem by asking these two questions. What are the local community's needs? And based on their needs, what will be the right solution? Don't just assume that you know what a community needs. For the Paradise Fire, I had people asking for luggage, storage bins. Never been asked for that before, but that's what they needed. We had somebody else who came in very irritated because they had animals and they couldn't find a leash for their dog. So we went out and bought him a leash for his dog, and he now thought we were the next best thing to sliced bread. So you have to ask people, what do you need, or what have you not been able to find that you need? And then if you have cash or gift cards or whatever, you can provide that for them. So our whole goal is to help our VOAD partners to cooperate, communicate, coordinate, collaborate, and then avoid that wicked problem. Don't just assume you know what everybody needs. Ask the question, what are your needs and what's going to be the right solution? And then know who the partners are that will maybe have the right solution for that need. And we had a lady come in. I asked her if she found everything she needed. She said, well, I really need a hospital toilet seat for my father-in-law. He's a type 2 diabetic. And I said, do you know where to get one? She said, yes. How much is it? She told me. We gave her the cash to go get it. I said, is there anything else? She goes, well, it would really help if we had a hospital bed. I said, okay, just while you're shopping, let me make a phone call. And I called Vance Taylor, the head of Cal OES's Access and Functional Needs. He's the chief for that. And when I was talking to him, I told him what she needed. He said, Jim, get me her name and number and we'll work on that. And I said, okay. So I found the lady, told her why I needed her name and phone number. I gave it to Vance, and within 24 hours, Vance called me back and he said, Jim, American Red Cross is going to provide the hospital bed. They're going to deliver it to her and set it up for her. So it was our distribution site, Vance Taylor from Cal OES, and American Red Cross that all worked together to meet the need for this family. And that's what VOAD is about. We don't ask people, we don't restrict people based on race or creed or sexual orientation or any of those things. It's just not stuff that comes up. When somebody comes into your site, they're there because they need help, and we're there to help. And so we want all of our VOAD partners to be very well connected in their community, know who's providing what services. And if they can't meet that need that's presented, they can direct someone to that group that can meet that need, because it's all about helping the person that's standing in front of you that's needing assistance. So that's our goal. So I don't know if anybody has any questions. I had my screen up to myself so I'd stay focused, but if anybody has any questions, I'd love to answer those.
All right, any questions for Jim?
No, they're all in shock. And Valerie, that's hosting this today, serves on our executive leadership team for NorCal VOAD. So she's been a great addition to our board.
No, thank you for that. So, and Jim, thank you for making time for us today. I know things are a little hectic today, especially, so we appreciate you getting on.
Yeah, I appreciate your time. I'm glad I could make it. Our family's dealing with the loss of a father-in-law, and we're getting ready for an estate sale, and that starts tomorrow. My wife and her brothers and sisters and all of us spouses have been working for about a week and a half to prepare for the estate sale, about 10 to 12 hours a day. So it all starts tomorrow. But like we like to say, disasters are never convenient, never. So you just got to be ready to rock and roll. So I want to thank everybody for being on this call. And if we can answer any questions, I'm going to put my name, my email, and my cell number in the chat for everyone. So if you have any questions after today, just reach out to me. My wife will tell you I need a 12-step program for my email habits. So it's the truth.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Jim. All right. While Jim's doing that, I'm going to go ahead and jump onto the United Policyholders piece here. Give me a second because I'm not the best at these tech things. And then I'm going to ask, do you see a screen or a screen with notes?
Just a screen.
Perfect. Good. Thank you. Just before I go, so you don't see my cheat sheet of notes. For everyone who's a case manager, United Policyholders, we typically would go in, pre-COVID, we would go into your community if we were funded and do a training. With COVID, we're just baking this into what we're doing here. But the idea is that we're providing you resources to help you with any client you have that's navigating insurance. And then after this event, after today's training, you'll receive we have a cheat sheet of hot links that you can take a topic a client might have and then provide them that resource without having to navigate our website. And you'll see when I get to the website, it's lovely, but it's just jam-packed full of information. And so about United Policyholders, we've been doing this for just over 30 years. We're a nonprofit. View us as kind of your technical resource on insurance, rebuilding, disaster taxes, and problem solving with issues interrelated there. We strive to be very empathetic. We focus on just coming through with those common sense, realistic expectations. When we bring in our experts, they're there to do what they do best and not provide a sales pitch to their company, because we need them for that technical expertise. So Team Up is our total team. We've got a small professional staff of about 15 folks based in San Francisco. I'm in Southern California. We've got somebody in Colorado. And, we partner heavily with government, businesses, and other nonprofits. One thing unique about United Policyholders is we have two sides of volunteers that we bring in, two different complementary pieces. So we have our consumer-focused professionals who do this work dealing with insurance and insurance-related issues every day that we bring in for their technical expertise. And then we have our survivor to survivor group. And those are those previous catastrophic loss survivors who are paying it forward. People who take advantage of our resources. And then, when they're in a position to be able to give back, we're part of their give back, whether they are on a webinar, they provide a publication, they're at the local assistance center when disaster hits. And we feel with bringing those two pieces, we give a very complementary view of this because it's personal, for insurance is very personal for people. It's their home. And the professional expertise, while very valued, unless you have that lived experience, it just doesn't connect for a lot of people. And so we try to do that pairing as much as possible. So I think most of our case managers have this book. This is our disaster recovery handbook. We call it the little yellow book. If you as a case manager need a copy for yourself, please let us know. If we have funding in your area, we'll get a box printed for your clients and mailed to your agencies. I'll be sure to put my email in the chat so that you can let me know where to mail yours and if you need them for your community. I think for all of our 2021 California wildfire impacted communities, we were funded by 2 funders. So we should be able to provide you any books you need for your clients, whether you are a FEMA disaster declared area or not. All right, and then here's the library we've set up for your survivors. And this is where I'm talking about those that cheat sheet that I'll provide you that has the hot links. Each disaster we set up one of these that we're responding to. And so, big elements are, everything's under here, recovery help. We've got professional help they can use, sample letters, examples, claims forms. As I mentioned earlier, our previous catastrophic loss survivors, they have a tip series called Survivor Speak that's got some very, very good information. And then right here on the right where my screen cut off, there is a tab that is, I believe, orange called Events. And that's where people can register for our webinars. And see, actually, it's not orange. The next one is orange. It's brown. Here we go. And then for general claims guidance help, we have a very in-depth library with more information than you probably ever wanted to see. Just take advantage of the search bar, go in and search for whatever you want, or encourage your clients to go there. And then getting to those samples of examples, we've got sample letters, documents, the big things for you to encourage your clients to have. And honestly, this top one is something you might want to have a copy of that you're tracking with them if you're dealing with somebody with insurance. We had a Woolsey Fire CPA who created this for us. It's an insurance accounting and max limits tracking spreadsheet. And so this is a tool for the survivor to make sure that they have been fully paid for everything owed to them. It's with the multiple buckets that they have for insurance, it's very hard for them to track what's what. And so he created this tool just to make his life easier and then shared it. And then the second is the sample contents inventory. And actually for this one, whether they have insurance or not, it's a great resource for folks. So if they're doing, if anyone's in a lawsuit, having that complete inventory so they can justify their loss. It's helpful for the taxes as well. So this is a good resource for anyone. This is just one example. There are actually 3. And there's some other resources that are on contents that are available by emailing this email address here, info@uphelp.org. A new thing for us, we're beta testing it now. So while it says it's in beta testing, it is working. So we have an Ask an Expert forum. This is something we had several years ago when we switched websites. We lost it. I swear I was not touching anything. It's a free space for them to write their questions and get an answer from an expert. So this is where we tap our professional experts. And so if they have a question, please encourage them to go to this site. Part of what they do is they can type in their question to begin with and search the answers that have already been provided in questions to see if the answer already exists there. Related to this will be a community forum that will open up where they'll have a resource by insurance group where they can share information and stuff in a private space. So that'll be coming hopefully this summer. Upcoming events, that tab I mentioned before, you know, we every month we'll be posting different activities. We are running these resources. As long as we're funded, we're running our roadmap to recovery. And so this is how they register. Anything that's a past event, once they go through the current events, they scroll down this page. It will list everything we've got. So for example, disaster taxes, somebody might have filed an extension on their taxes. They're worrying about it now. We did that webinar, I believe, in February. So they would just need to go back to that. It's a great way for them to get their questions answered. We understand that a lot of people don't have connectivity at their homes where they are right now. And so highly encourage any of you in areas with limited internet access to consider either allowing survivors to come in during your open office hours and watch these recordings and access these resources, or for live events, if you're able, I encourage you to look at doing a viewing party where you can open up your space and connect them to that. And these are some recorded workshops. These are the ones specific to the 2020. This we've got some for the 2021. Just wanted to give you an idea of more of the complete set. And we just finished the new version of Mechanics of Rebuilding Your Home and Wildfire Prepared Rebuilding Materials. So this is a great resource for your survivors. Most of them don't take advantage of it. The California Department of Insurance, they can file online or call or print the paper form and mail it in, request for assistance with any issue they're having, be it not being paid in a timely manner, excessive depreciation, any issues they're having coming to a resolution on what they're owed. So please do encourage them to take advantage of that. And then the last thing is just a call out to thank our funders. Our CRC and Golden State Finance Authority are underwriting all the work we're doing for the 2021 California fires. And I thank them for that, because without them, we would not be able to do what we're doing. And I know I have some questions in the chat. And yes, so anybody looking for books, yes, put that in there. And I will put my email in case you need to do that. And then one of the things I forgot to mention, in our upcoming events, we have a program called Survivor to Survivor, which is strictly focused on, it's where we pair those previous disaster survivors with, they serve as moderators and facilitators. We do it on Tuesdays. We've been doing it the 1st and 3rd of the month. We're not doing it obviously with the holiday. The 4th, 5th of July, we won't be doing it. This we'll be doing it on the 19th. But you know, do encourage them, because especially with COVID, but just with the reality in general of disaster, people are scattered so far from their local network of friends and neighbors that it's a way to connect with people who might be their neighbors, or with people who are going through the same thing. And what we brought that in because with COVID specifically, we found that what would normally happen with a real our real roadmap to recovery program, this is what we're doing. What would happen afterwards is we would do the webinar, we would do the meeting, the educational workshop, and then people would stay, you know, an hour and a half, 2, sometimes 3 hours, just catching up with neighbors they hadn't seen, brainstorming with each other on, you know, I'm getting pushback on my depreciation for my contents, and people were really stuck in how to move forward. And so that opportunity to have that fellowship and collaborative brain work, for lack of a better word, really was beneficial to everyone we worked with. And when COVID happened, we lost that. And so Survivor to Survivor is our way of trying to bring that back to people. So please, if your folks are struggling in this space, encourage them to consider joining if they're able to. And then, and Nancy, thank you for the kudos about the webinar last night. I will, for anyone who hasn't watched them, I will be very blunt. We, on our best day, can get it down to an hour and a half. We keep breaking them into bite-sized pieces, but the problem is then we do a little deeper dive because people have questions. So they are dense, just like our website. And so, you know, be aware that that's why we record them, so that people can go back and view them at their leisure and get what they need. So please do take advantage of that. We will get yellow books out to everybody next week. And any other questions for me before we jump to our next presenter, which will be Amy Medford. All right, well, without further ado, I will turn it over to Amy. Amy, if you unmute.
That always helps. Unmute myself. Hello, all. Welcome, Amy Meffert, Salvation Army Deputy Director of Disaster Services. I cover Northern California. I know majority of you on here, and some of you I do not know. But those of you that do know, I have a co-partner, Patrick McGinn, who is our EDS Director, and he covers both divisions. So I just kind of support the smaller northern side of California. So I'm going to talk today about what Salvation Army is and our emergency disaster services. For those of you, let's see if I can move my slide. Oh, come on. Okay, there we go. So what do we do? Who are we and what do we do during disasters? So Salvation Army, we deploy our local Corps officers or incident management on site. We're usually the first entity that's on site 24 to 48 hours after a shelter is opened. We work alongside Red Cross, county shelters. As we know, during COVID, some state entities opened up some shelters, some hotels at the time because there was no congregated shelter. So we come in and provide food service, hygiene, emotional and spiritual care. We come in and do our local assistance center where we're able to provide direct funds to survivors that were impacted. Donations management, Campfire was our huge distribution center that we had going, where survivors can come in and grab anything from clothing to can openers, to shoes, to coats, to even boots, where they were able to go and sift through their property. We do volunteer coordination, and then we have early and long-term recovery, bulk distribution, as well as 24, I'd say 24/7, but 365 days of the year, we are constantly training our new teams ready to respond for our next busy fire season. Besides disaster services, there are lots and lots of Salvation Army locations. We call them cores, where we can cure hunger, overcome poverty, provide shelters, equip families with job trainings, combat addiction. We have drug and alcohol programs. We are a church, so we definitely have church services, serve veterans, meet the greater need, and brighten people during the holidays. Our division is broken up into different territories, and we are the Del Oro division. I talk about Patrick McGinn because he also covers Golden State. So we are part of the Western Territory. I know a lot of you have worked with other of our EDS directors in the Central Territory, Eastern Territory, Southern Territory. We are part of the Western Territory, and our division is Del Oro. And so you'll see these two states here, California and Nevada. We have 26 Salvation Army locations. We went ahead and pinpointed them. I'm going to move my camera on this map here. And so some of this map is a little bit duplicated as it's zoomed in. So we have offices from Redding, all the way in this top left corner here is Eureka, it barely made it on the map, all the way down to Stockton, and then down to Fremont, California. So anything that has a star next to it are our core locations that have disaster service teams. Not all teams have a canteen where we can come do mobile units, but there are trained teams where they can help support during disasters. So we have about 12 good teams. I would say 7 to 8 of them are really strong, and some of them are just teams that are beginning to learn how to support during disaster services. We also have 28 service extensions. So these locations throughout here are where there's no actual Salvation Army location. It's a branch of the Salvation Army. So maybe it's a church where Salvation Army is used for a food pantry. Place of worship and centers are not located here. These are just small service extensions. As we know, the Dixie Fire was in a service extension area. Here in the Caldor Fire was also a service extension area. So we definitely don't have a full-blown Salvation Army facility where it has our community center or church services, but we do have support services. So these are all of our service extensions. We have different levels of response. We always start off our levels of response with local. So if there's a fire, as we know, Redding's had 2 evacuation where they were on standby for evacuation. It always starts local. And so that's where our local Salvation Army comes in. They're on standby, ready to prepare. From there, it goes to division. If it's such a big enough disaster where the Redding location can't handle it, then it's considered a divisional disaster. And as we get bigger, the divisional disasters then go into the urban earthquakes, where we can get other territories in to help us. Other divisions in to help us, where we know Golden State, looking back at this map, I'll go back to this map. Golden State's really near us. Modesto's are really close, where it's like part Golden State, part Del Oro. We can call in other divisions to come support us. Then we go into territorial disasters. During Camp Fire, we actually had to pull in some folks from our different territories. We pulled in some folks from our, I believe it was our Intermountain Territory, or it's our Western Territory, but our Intermountain Division, which was like Montana, Idaho. So they came in to support us. So we're able to pull our local resources that goes beyond our local resources to our territorial resources. And then we go into the national disaster support, where it's catastrophic. And in 1906, the San Francisco earthquake and Hurricane Harvey, they brought in national disaster support. We go into long-term recovery. This is something new that Salvation Army did come this 2017 Napa Santa Rosa fire, where we started to do early and long-term recovery. I think that's where in our division here, the very first time that we've learned about disaster services. I feel we've grown so much since then, but we were able to come in and provide early recovery, such as food, clothing, housing, utility, and financial assistance. And then we went in and did early casework. So rental, deposits, furnishings, household supplies, work tools, school supplies were huge. Car repairs. Some people had no means to get to and from work. So just being able to provide car repairs so that they had stable transportation was huge, as well as dental and medical procedures. So Salvation Army supports long-term efforts with the flexibility of the program that's adaptable to unique needs of individuals of the community. Here's just a different casework that we did. Again, 2017 Napa Santa Rosa fire was the first time we came in to do disaster casework. 2018, we went into car fire. We were really huge on car fire, providing power poles, septic tanks, and water boats or water buffaloes. Campfire, we came in and did early recovery before disaster case management was even in the works of getting started. Kincaid, I joke because it was the most organized disaster ever. It really fell within the Santa Rosa LTRG recovery. And so we were able to come in and provide some rental support for them. North Complex Fire, we did some water tanks, Slater Fire, Zog Fire. They're actually still doing short-term recovery or long-term recovery for them up in our Redding location. And then Caldor, we are the current lead agency for disaster case management. As you can see, we've always done case work. And so Caldor is our first response where we were able to do disaster case management. So it's been exciting, it's been challenging, and I appreciate all of your guys' support as I'm reaching out, just asking 5 million questions. Currently, Caldor, we are funded till March 2023. There was approximately 600 homes destroyed. We are learning that some were secondary homes, so we're looking at more of 400 total destroyed homes of primary homeowners. We have 2 full-time disaster case managers, currently 18 open cases. We have 137 on the DCM wait list, as we know that there's a wait list for people to see a disaster case manager. We have collected data on additional 200, I think it's 74, I can't really see my 245 survivors we have data collected on that we'll be doing outreach for. I think the best thing taking away from this is taking the best care possible of ourselves and our coworkers will ultimately have the positive impact on how survivors cope with stress and recover from the effects of disasters. And so that's really huge. And last but not least, my favorite slide that I put together for you all, and of course it's not moving, is we were able to send 15 kids that were affected by the Caldor to our Camp Del Oro. I want to give kudos to the Cox family, where they were able to donate sleeping bags to these children. As we know, these families lost everything. So just to even have a sleeping bag to go to camp was really huge for them. Their smiling faces, they got to go on this charter bus. I don't know what was more excited, a limo or this charter bus, but they absolutely had a fantastic great time. And so I'm now going to be open for questions. Silent. Did I put everybody to sleep?
Can I just say something about Camp Del Oro?
Laura, sure.
So I'm Jennifer McKim Hibbard. I am a Caldor fire survivor, but I also work for West Slope Foundation. My son went on this camp and he came back a completely changed little boy. He was sad and kind of depressed beforehand because, he's 8 and he misses his home just as much as anybody else, and my husband and myself included. But when he came back, the look on his face was that of a little boy again. And that alone is, as a parent, I can't thank the Salvation Army enough for providing that, and for Kevin for providing the sleeping bags. It was such an incredible experience for all of them, and it just allowed them just to be kids again. So thank you very much.
Yeah, and if I can just say, Camp Del Oro is not something that's just for campfire survivors. It's a camp that's held the entire summer. Of course, COVID, the last 2 years, camp wasn't able to have congregated kids at camp. So the opportunity is open for anybody. We actually sent the kids with our service extension office. So it's an amazing opportunity. So besides them being campfire survivors, camp is $300, and we were able to bring the cost down to $25. And that was just so they can hold their spot, so that they said that they were actually going to attend and not have us on the hook for $300 a child. So it's wonderful, and I appreciate all the time that I've gotten today. So thanks, guys. Back to you, Val.
All right. Oh, other Valerie, temporary Valerie. Thank you so much, Amy. I'm so lucky to have met you last summer and have you in my phone contacts for every darn fire that hits. The Salvation Army is there always. So
We're ready. We're on standby with the fire in Nevada County. So
and let's hope we do not need to.
no, but it's always good to be on
No.
standby. It's always good to
Yes.
be on standby.
Yeah, for sure. I'm on standby as well with your, direct dial right in there. So that's old school. Anyway, thank you, Amy. And I'd like to welcome our next presenter is Steve Elliott, and he's with the United Methodist Committee on Response. And he has done amazing work supporting the long term of our long-term recovery groups. And he, like Amy, he's there for all of our counties to help. We appreciate everything you do. So Steve, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okie doke. Let me get my slideshow up here. Is that up for everybody? Somebody give me a high sign that you've got slides.
It looks great, Steve.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Laura. It's a pleasure to be here. And I want to extend a special thank you to Valerie Brown for organizing these 2 days of presentations. I find it incredibly useful. My name is Steve Elliott. I'm with the United Methodist Church. I serve as the disaster response coordinator and missions coordinator for the northern part of California. I've been doing this for a little over 20 years, and it's a pleasure to work with Amy and a lot of the people that are on this session. Who are we? Well, we are divided into Northern California and Southern California, plus what we call UMCOR. So we provide resources throughout all the disasters up and throughout the entire state, backed up by UMCOR. So UMCOR is our global humanitarian aid organization. They help us with funding. So many of the grants that we provide for local disasters are supported by UMCOR, and they provide lots of other resources. For example, DCM training, DCM case manager best practices. We provide the training for Amy's new case managers for the Caldor fire. So there's lots that we can bring to bear. We participate in all phases of the relief and recovery. So for example, for the relief phase of a disaster, we are at the local assistance center handing out gift cards, wildfire buckets, cleaning kits, hygiene kits, all those things that people need in that moment, either as an evacuee or as a survivor. We then follow that with immediate evacuee and survivor assistance, which might be food, clothing, temporary shelter, things like that. And then we also provide survivor site services. So for a flood, that would be a muck out of the home. For a wildfire, we have early response teams that we dispatch to the survivor's home site and help them look for things that they might have survived the fire, grandma's wedding ring or things like that. So that's the kinds of stuff we can do in the relief phase. In the recovery phase, we separate it between what we call short-term and long-term. Short-term, we provide lots of local survivor assistance, could be temporary rental assistance, could be food and clothing, could be gift cards. Our preference for all of the short-term work is to work through our local churches, and they become the point for the local assistance, and they know the community way better than I would. We also provide short-term grants. So we actually provide, within a few days of a disaster, we can provide a $10,000 grant, no questions asked, to the local church on request to fund survivor aid. Long-term, we provide all kinds of donation resources, participate in resource fairs, generally working through the local churches. We participate in long-term recovery groups. I would, and the local church representatives will do that as well. And we are committed long-term. So when we say long-term, we mean to the end of the closure of a long-term recovery. For example, Katrina or Puerto Rico or places like that, we've been at it for many years. We are a funder for unmet needs. So we will sign up to actually provide funding with our funding partners to help survivors with needs that are presented by the case managers. In all cases, the case managers are on the front line of sorting out what the need is, presenting it to the funders roundtable, and we provide money at those roundtables. And last but not least, we provide rebuild volunteers. This week, I'm up here in Paradise working for Kevin Cox with a team of 14 people painting 3 houses. So we're on the ground, and we see that through right to the end. Our current long-term recovery commitments are the ones listed here. We've been working on the campfire, and you can see the kinds of things we do for each of the recent fires. We are committed to these recoveries all the way through to the very end. We're happy to work with you all. I'm happy to field questions from case managers. We're happy to provide case manager resources. And here's some contact information, and I believe Valerie is going to provide that to you all.
Absolutely, yes. I'm gonna, I'll get the deck from you and get all that information. Thank you so much. All right, any questions for Steve? All right, well, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm seeing the kudos coming in. All right, well, thank you, Steve. And now we'll have Mark with Episcopal Disaster Services. Come on.
Good morning, folks, and I'm sorry I don't have a fancy slideshow like everybody else, so you're just gonna have to look at these wonderful mutton chops that I'm growing out. My name is Mark DeBelka, and I am the mission for disasters in the Episcopal Diocese of Northern California. To give a brief overview for those who don't know, the Episcopal Church is the North American branch of the Anglican Church, which is the second largest Christian denomination in the world at this time. And we are one of 6 dioceses, which is, consider a diocese more like a state government level within our church. We are one of 6 dioceses in the state of California, and by far the largest. I have 23 of the counties of California in my scope. If it is Benicia or north, it probably will be in my zone of coverage. We are very new to the scene of disaster work, which seems kind of strange when it comes to the idea that Northern California has been targeted by Mother Nature for the past several years. But we understood that something needed to be done as part of our calling. And so we are building this program, and we are the first program of its type within the Episcopal Church or within the Anglican Communion anywhere in the world. I am, in fact, a dedicated staff member working directly for the bishop, and I am her closest advisor when it comes to things having to do with disasters, both natural and man-made. Everything from the wildfire that we're all keeping an eye on in Nevada County right now, to the bomb that was found outside one of our churches on Sunday morning. The services that we provide that are going to be most useful to you folks is ahead of the problem. We build community ties between local congregations and at-risk populations. We work to identify those people who might not normally want to find themselves registered with the government, or to go to places that they recognize sheriff's deputies are walking around in, that sort of thing, for whatever reason, perhaps undocumented, perhaps outstanding legal problems. But folks who need the assistance and might be afraid to get it. We try to build those relationships before the bad things start to happen. One of my personal responsibilities is to work with the 64 local congregations that we have spread out across the North State to prepare for disasters. And this is all hazards pre-planning. The scope of that is not just for the church building and the congregation itself, but also how does the church fit into the larger disaster plan of the community in which it is located. And I am working very hard to tie us into the community so that we can become a part of the solution rather than just another aspect of the problem. Now, when it comes to your work in disaster response, I provide hands-on guidance for our local congregations at the time of the disaster. Many times, I will actually show up at the local churches, sit down, work with their leadership team, and make funds available immediately to evacuees, to those who are seeking shelter, to those who need a tank of gas so that they're able to move on and get out of the way of the response at that time. So we provide immediate funding. And then in the short term, we look at organizing our attendance at local assistance centers, pop-up distribution points, and that sort of thing. And here is where I need to give a huge shout out to Steve Elliott and the folks of UMCOR, who, when we had no idea what we were doing, we turned to them and we said, will you train us? And Steve took some of my volunteers under his wing, and we now have a functioning program when it comes to working at local assistance centers, where we're able to distribute finances and material goods for those people who are in need, as well as start to connect them into other services that might be provided in the church, but not through disaster resilience. Then for the long term, I am the face of the larger church. And by the larger church, I'm talking about nationwide. I am the face of the larger church during long-term recovery. And I take an active seat at long-term recovery groups for the Camp Fire, the Dixie Fire, and the Caldor Fire at this time. My funding comes from the larger church, and I'm able to leverage large grants into our areas of recovery. So I am able to combine on the short term monies that come in just from Northern California, but on the long term, monies that come in from all over the United States. And so at times I do unfortunately find myself in competition for funds with those who have lived through hurricanes or other large disasters in other parts of the United States. My service in long-term recovery is focused primarily on emotional and spiritual well-being, as well as unmet needs. I am just now entering the realm of the simple unmet need. We have been functioning primarily in complex unmet needs and making sure that people get rehoused. But please feel free to reach out and contact me if you have a need of any of our resources that I might be able to provide to you. And to do that, I actually am going to share the screen. There's my contact information. I am able to assist in the short term, the midterm, and the long term, primarily financially, but also in the areas of mental health monitoring and spiritual support. But that doesn't mean that you have to limit your questions and your requests of me to that. This very simply, there are three things that I cannot fund for you down the road. One is personnel expenses. Two is technological build out. And three is in general, any type of infrastructure. My larger grantor does not allow for those costs. Instead, targeting our monies into actually going hands-on with the people that find themselves in need. So I'm going to take this down and I will open up to any questions that folks might have at this time.
Well, thank you, Mark. It's so nice seeing an expansive partner coming out into definitely the state, but certainly the nation. So we're excited to have your engagement with all of us here. So question in the chat, Andrea says, are you encouraging your churches to be partners in local VOADs?
Yes, absolutely. When it comes to VOAD, I am the church's representative on NorCal VOAD, and in the places where I'm able to get the volunteers who are willing to do so, we are coming online in the county VOADs. We are founding partner in Humboldt COAD, founding partner in Siskiyou County VOAD, and we have seats at Butte and one other. But I am actively always seeking recruits to join in the VOAD COAD movement.
I would love you to get me one for Santa Cruz for the long-term recovery group there for the 2020 CZU fire. And as a VOAD chair in San Diego, I would love to get one there.
I actually have a coordination call coming up with the dioceses of California and San Diego, and I will put both of those requests before them.
All right. Anyone else with a request? Get them to Mark.
It honestly doesn't matter where in the state you have a request. If you get it to me, I will make sure that it gets routed to the correct people in the church. Just because I'm the only program of this type doesn't mean that we can't start encouraging it in other places as well.
All right. Well, thank you. Any other questions from Mark before we go to our next and last presenter? I see we've got Lake County and Mendocino County VOADs as well have put in the chat that they would like consideration. Wonderful. And you've got some kudos there as well in the chat.
Very good. Thank you.
Right, so without further ado, let's go ahead and invite our last presenter, Jenny Campbell with Church World Service.
Hi, everybody. It's nice to see everyone. This is a great presentation, and I will echo everybody else and say thank you to Valerie and everyone else who is making this happen. It's such a huge benefit. I'm with Church World Service. I actually wear a few hats, so I'm just going to let you know where I come from because I think that might help with some context. I know some of you know me from the Los Angeles Wildfires Long-Term Recovery Group. I was am the executive director for the Long-Term Recovery Group here. We developed the Community Recovery Organization, and that led to my working with Church World Service, which is what I'm here to talk about today. I think they served as our fiscal agent. Okay, so it kind of helps because I know many of us wear multiple hats, and Church World Service has brought me on board to help them with their domestic disaster response process and program, and to pull it through where it's done so much good in the past. Church World Service has been functioning since I think right after World War II. I was going to give a date. So I'm learning a lot still about the organization, but the nutshell is that they have been working both domestically and internationally for many, many, many years and being very successful in the international space, and very, very specifically with looking at, food and a safe place to call home. I'm going to jump now, it's a fascinating organization. And I can tell you, I'm a huge fan because one of the things that Church World Service did was empower our group to succeed through their fiscal sponsorship. And that is huge for a long-term recovery group, as all of you know, I'm sure. So that is one thing that Church World Service can bring to the table when a natural disaster or a man-made disaster does occur. At the very beginning of, and I'm sorry, I don't have slides. You have to look at me too. And I don't have any fancy fur growing on my face. I'm sorry. And I wish I did have slides. Next time I'll be better prepared. But the best thing I could say is we do a lot of similar things to our partners out there. UMCOR spoke about what they do right away. They're helping in that immediate response effort. We have kits. We call it kits and blankets, hygiene kits, immediately partner with all of our memberships and make sure that we're not duplicating benefits and get as much out there as possible. And then we move to where I think we have a pretty significant impact, and that's the short-term recovery. And I like that Steve said that. I don't think enough of it, that wasn't said enough in the beginning of our disaster, that short and long-term recovery exist. And that's where Church World Service comes in and offers that short-term assessment immediately after the disaster and starts looking at what's needed to develop a long-term recovery group. And that the sooner you can hit the ground running and understand the needs, the better. And that's where Church World Service can bring in, partner with, and bring in a team of experts. There's a number of groups out there that do this in specific regions if they're funded. And Church World Service has pulled through over the years by bringing a team in and assessing a disaster. Some of you may remember Suzanne Gilmore. She was here. She's since retired from Church World Service. And so she would come in and assess, for example, in Kentucky. She went out, she assessed the situation, and then they decided how they were going to support long-term, the long-term development. And what we do is we come in and we start looking at what will it take to ignite the passion of the local community to stand up a long-term recovery group and walk alongside that local community as they step up. It's usually a 2 to 6 month commitment that Church World Service will make if they're invited by the community to bringing this group forward, because the idea is that we bring it forward, we establish the leadership, we establish, whether there's going to be fiscal agency required, how all of this looks. And many of you have been going through this for a while, and that's something that Church World Service brings with our partners to the table. Again, I mentioned the fiscal agency, which is critical. And then there's the pieces that go with that, and looking at what it means to be a fiscal sponsor, making sure we work with a local foundation, making sure we get the fiscal sponsorship covered by another, the fees covered by another partner, and getting that fundraising going, because we're starting to understand right away, boots on the ground, what the needs are, so that community assessment can be done as soon as possible. The other thing that I wanted to highlight that Church World Service has a niche in is something that we really missed in Los Angeles. And that's the relationship with the refugee, migrant, immigrant, undocumented populations. There is a trust network that needs to be built, and Church World Service holds a lot of those relationships with a lot of our partners. So if that disaster occurs in an area that is dense with the migrant populations, then we partner with those groups that are already working and trusted, especially with even the schools, the churches. We can come forward and we can help bring those needs to the long-term recovery group table where they may not come otherwise. And that is something that was missed out on in Los Angeles. Very difficult to pull together. And so that piece is something that I would like for everybody to kind of keep in mind, because it is important in any disaster. And if anybody out there is struggling with that particular group right now, we are happy to pitch in and help. The other piece that I wanted to highlight is just the concept of ensuring that you start early and that you're able to rely on a partner who can step in short term and bring you through to the initiation of that long term, and getting all of the pieces in place so that the community can take over. So that is about the extent of what I have to say. I will just offer that I'm happy to answer questions now or later. And if anybody has any questions, let me know.
Well, considering we're moving right into the Q&A, you have impeccable timing. So any questions for Jenny or any of our other presenters?
I'll ask a silly question because that's what they get to do.
There are no silly questions.
As a DCM and for the Dixie Fire, do we have access to all of the, Steve, Mark, Jenny, for support with, because a lot of you mentioned the short-term needs, and we're still, I feel, in that phase where we still need a lot of short-term needs. And it seems like, it just seems like those are still really important to our community. So can we contact you and, discuss and see how we can get some of those short-term needs met?
Yeah, I'll be providing the follow-up email will have contact information for those who presented. If you have, and just this goes back to what Val Mahanovich started with our presentation today. If you're not sure who to go to for a resource, reach out to her and she'll help you figure out that right person. So you've got two. You'll be able to contact people directly based on what you've heard today. And then if you're not sure where to go for that resource, Val Mahanovich or Jim Huey with NorCal VOAD would be your go-to resources to figure out where to go.
I can add a little bit there, Valerie. Our main representative for the Dixie Fire is Becky Stockdale there in Portola. But also I serve on the Funders Roundtable and am working with Kevin Cox to look forward to the volunteer rebuilds. And I do attend the Dixie Fire general meeting. So Nancy, if something,
I remember your name.
yeah. So if something comes up, we are major committed. We've already set aside additional money that Becky can access, or I can to be out.
Great, thank you.
And I know that's true for Mark as well in the Dixie Fire.
Yes, absolutely. And actually, if you can't remember my number and you want to get a hold of both Steve and me, you can talk to Becky because I work very closely with her as well.
Okay, great. Yeah, we've done Becky too. Thank you.
All right, and then Jacqueline with FEMA, then that connection can also be made through the DFC with the unmet needs or the funders roundtable. Thank you for that. All right, well, do one last call for questions, and if we don't end up with any, you'll all get a little bit more than a 15-minute break before we jump on with Imagine You and their trauma-informed care for you and your clients. So do one last call for questions. And if no questions, you guys will regroup back at 11:30. All right, going once, going twice. Gonna pause the recording.
Yeah, we'll give you, yes, we'll give you a heads up. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for staying around for our presentation. First of all, I just want to say we're really honored and grateful for this opportunity to be in the company of all of you working in the disaster space. And I see some familiar faces here from the LTRGs we're involved in. So I just want to introduce myself. My name is Cynthia Kalmanson. I'm the Executive Director of the Integrative Medical Clinic Foundation, also known as the Imagine You Project. With us today are Dr. Ellen Barnett, the founder of Imagine You, Pam Hood, Imagine You trainer, and Carla Denner, trainer in training, and joining us. And all four of us will be presenting today. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and start with our slideshow. While I'm presenting the slideshow, if you wouldn't mind putting your name, can just be your first name if you wish, and your role. So what your job title, basically, that would be helpful just to know kind of who's in the room. And let me share my screen. All right, everybody can see that, I'm assuming. So Imagine You is a training that we present for disaster case managers and second responders. And Imagine You is a project of the nonprofit Integrative Medical Clinic Foundation, and we're based here in Sonoma County in Santa Rosa. Our program was developed early on working in the healthcare sector, and then we moved into social services. And then, of course, with the onset of the Tubbs fire, we shifted a lot of our attention and focus to working with teams of second responders. And so the current training program, a piece of which we're presenting today, represents work that we have really developed and honed since 2017, working with several teams. The Imagine You approach integrates evidence-based practices for mental and behavioral health research and trauma-informed care. And really our approach builds on and enhances the skills that the disaster case managers, crisis counselors, resource navigators, community health workers, and others really already have. So we build on a baseline of that capacity and introduce additional tools and skills to enhance their work. Our approach also serves to mitigate the effects of vicarious trauma that are certainly absorbed by those working in disaster response and recovery roles. Our materials are currently in English and Spanish, and we actually are in the process now of a big project to move all of our curriculum into Spanish so that it's both translated and culturally responsive. The goals of our training are twofold. One, to provide skills to help staff more effectively offer client support and utilize skillful ways to help clients move forward, but also to provide staff with tools to boost their own resilience and to mitigate the vicarious trauma they experience working with vulnerable populations. Our presentations are interactive on Zoom, and we're just now dipping our toe in the water to get back to doing some in-person trainings. And we work typically in healthcare and social services. Those are our two kind of main areas. Our training focuses on role playing, uses real case examples, self-reflection exercises, and peer support. And our whole training consists of 10 scaffolded modules. They're an hour and a half a piece, delivered virtually. And then we follow that up, boosting folks' skills and skill retainment with some follow-up sessions. This is a list of our training modules. Today, we're going to be presenting the module, How to Ask What Matters Most, and you'll hear a lot more about that in just a few minutes. This is our team of trainers, and some of them are with us today. And this is just some data on our outcomes. Valerie's going to email this slide deck to you, so I'll kind of move through this quickly, not to really focus on data. Here's some of the responses that we've received from our trainings. We've been so grateful and honored to work with some amazing teams in Shasta County and Fresno County and Santa Cruz County. And now we're about to start working with folks in Plumas County. And this is a little bit about our project. Really, for the past 2 decades, our foundation has been building sustainable capacity by teaching our Imagine You approach and by partnering with organizations serving the most vulnerable. Our aim is to increase resiliency among individuals in the community. By supporting self-determination in ourselves and others, we really hope to shift the power dynamic between people and institutions toward a more equitable and just environment. And so this is our contact information. Again, you'll get this slide deck, so kind of don't want to take up too much time from the rest of our training, but thanks for the opportunity to present this and really welcome all of you here today. And now I'll turn it over to Pam, our trainer.
Hi there, everyone. My name is Pam Hood. I'm one of the Imagine You trainers. And actually, before I go any further, can you all hear me? Well, I'm rocking the earbuds, okay. The training module for today is part of the Imagine You project. And today we'll focus on how to ask what matters most, or the what matters most question. And as we get started, I'd like to review some of our ground rules. In order to create a safe and supportive environment, we ask that you keep all the information shared by anyone here in strict confidence at all times. We'd also request that you treat one another with courtesy, respect, and dignity so everyone can feel comfortable sharing any thoughts and feelings that may come up. At no time will anyone be asked to talk if they choose not to. By saying, "I pass," your wish to be silent at that time will be honored. Can we all agree to these? If yes, please nod or give me a thumbs up. Awesome. Thanks. Now, I'd like to know how you are all doing today. So we've got, let's see, can I get a head count? Are we massive? Are we under 10?
64 people.
Okay, that answered that question. I'm flexing for you guys. That's awesome. At the end of this whole conference, that's amazing. Thank you for your presence. So let's do this. In the chat, if you wouldn't mind, please share your name and your role again. And here's the big ask, 1 or 2 words about how you're feeling right now. And I'll read the fields, a few of the fields out loud. And yes, I guess it's okay to say tired or whatever after this long conference. That's a safe go-to. Thanks. We'll give ourselves a couple of minutes to do that. Oh, someone's hungry, not hangry, but hungry. That's good. tired, eager, excited, motivated. Well, tired and hungry, I think that probably constitutes or for hangry. Fine, ready to make positive changes, grateful. Inspired, anxious, frustrated, eager to learn more. Optimistic. Hopeful and motivated. Awesome. And feel free to continue posting your check-ins as I continue. The purpose of today's training is to give you an opportunity to experience, in my humble opinion, one of the Imagine You project's most impactful tools in our entire toolkit. And it's the skill of asking what matters most. Now, all our tools are designed to be highly adaptable. They're designed to support you, no matter your role in your agency. And they're designed to help you personally. Now, there's several reasons why we're offering this particular training to you all today. Foremost, we recognize and appreciate the incredible roles you all have played in supporting your various communities. We really do honor your work, especially in these extraordinarily trauma-heavy times. There are multiple layers of crises all intersecting at the same time that affect us all. But I know, we all at Imagine You know, that it's especially been challenging for you all these times of disasters, one after the other, let alone COVID coming into the mix. It's been challenging for both you in your professional capacity and, as Cynthia mentioned, in your own lives. So that's reason number one. Number two, we want to offer you a tool for providing trauma-informed support that you can use with your clients and yourself. We'd encourage you to continue to adopt what we call this both and posture throughout today's workshop. And I think Ellen's going to be mentioning more about this a bit later. In other words, consider in the back of your mind how the tools, in this case, how the question, asking the question, what matters most, might be used within your various roles professionally and personally. That's number two. Number three, all of the Imagine You tools are evidence and research-based tools. They're also informed by decades of in-the-field work by Ellen and others on the team. Now, what we typically don't do in any of our workshops is do a data dump, a literal data dump, and present all that research, throw it all at you. That said, if you would like to obtain those materials, links to those materials, copies of those materials, reach out to Cynthia in the chat or preferably by email, and she'll forward that stuff on to you. What I will quickly share is how our tool for today, asking what matters most, may support and enhance your current tools and approaches for offering trauma-informed support for your team, your clients, and for yourselves. Now, we all realize that the same event may be experienced by folks in different ways at different times. through the immediate stages of the aftermath of some disaster. Now, that immediate aftermath might be days to perhaps 3 or 5 years. Let's call that the short term, as well as the long term. For example, as in the case of childhood trauma, whose effects can be experienced for an entire lifetime. So what can we do? What tool could we offer to help you as you try to present and offer for your clients, your team, and for yourself some trauma-informed help? Now, in the current context of initial disaster relief, your agencies are definitely in the triage mode, or are handing off to one another over that broadly conceived triage mode of food and shelter and the like. What we've come to realize in offering our workshops, however, is that incorporating the seemingly simple question, what matters most to you? Perhaps it's what matters most to you right in this minute. And I have it on good authority that what matters most to some of you is food, and some of you is rest, or whatever, right? This moment, what matters most, this moment? Or looking back, backing up a little bit, what matters most more broadly in the next months or years? And we're still in that disaster triage frame, right? Or even more broadly, what matters most in an entire life? Getting a hold of that question, getting the skills required to help you ask that question can help you maximize the assistance you can deliver for your client. You're not God, although some of you perhaps think you can be at certain times, right? But we all know you cannot deliver everything your clients need, desperately need, that your colleagues desperately need, that your family desperately needs, that you yourself might desperately need. We all get caught up from time to time in the drama and trauma, be it from other people. It could be Kanye, it could be Kyrie Irving, it could be relatives, coworkers, clients, and yes, ourselves. It's all too easy, as you know, to respond reactively, reflexively, or on autopilot. We sometimes jump to assumptions and sometimes opt for that one-size-fits-all approach, even when our own experience tells us, has shown us time after time that that very approach sometimes comes back to bite us, or it bites our client, which in turn ultimately comes back to bite us. So your ability to understand what it is that is most important to you in this instance may help inform healthier, safer, more sustaining choices for yourself. It may help you select the more viable, but perhaps equally healing option from the paltry options available to you or your family or your client at the time. A quick example. For instance, does what matters most to an individual is bonding time, bonding with you, bonding with friends, bonding with a family member, with Disney as the glue, or is it physically going to Disneyland? You may be hearing, oh, what matters most? I really want to go to Disneyland, 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 Disneyland. Perhaps really digging, probing a little bit, you might come to realize and elicit from them that binge watching Disney films or 10 repeats of The Lion King may be the genuine ticket to that deeply, desired bonding that actually matters most to the person. Now, Ellen will perhaps paint the next picture a little bit more fully, but imagine a client rightfully obsessed with getting a home, be it 4 walls of whatever material, right? And that's what you hear obsessively, obsessively. I have to get a home. I have to get a home. I have to get back to my home. I have to build a home. Is it that home, and we're thinking of physical home, that's really what matters most to that individual? Or does HOME really mean sharing a meal together? Because that's what home means to the client. And we'll be fleshing out some of these other examples later on in the workshop. Our hope is that you'll find this particular asking what matters most workshop helpful just as one more tool in your own pre-existing toolkit for providing trauma-informed support for your clients, your team, and for yourselves. Now, we'd always like to welcome any feedback you have on this particular tool or any other tools that we offer, and would be absolutely delighted to hear from you in the future, should you have an opportunity to implement them. Now I'm going to move on to our first task, or maybe it's our third task at this point. And that is getting down to the what matters most question. And we'll do this by engaging in a little 2-3 minute short exercise, a thought exercise, just something to think through on your own. Now you can do this with your eyes open or closed, whatever mode is comfortable for you. I invite you now to take a slow, deep breath and let it out. Clear your mind. Think for a moment. What is it that matters most to you in your life? And as I said, it could be this minute, this week, this month, when you guys get back on the job, next couple of years, your entire life. Just pick whatever one you want to focus on. What matters most to you in your life? And I'll be silent for a few moments and let you think. Notice how it feels in your body when you think about what matters most. Can you put a word to that feeling? How does it feel inside? What's a word that might express that feeling about what matters most to you? Now I'd like you to make a connection between that answer, what matters most to you, on the one hand, and your being at this training, or perhaps this entire conference. Is there a connection? Do you see a connection? What does it feel like when you examine that answer, what matters most to you, and the fact that you're here at this particular training, or perhaps that you've had this very long and rich experience at this experiences at this conference, that experience? Now notice how you feel physically or emotionally about that connection. Great. Thank you for trying something new with me. I appreciate your openness and willingness to do a little experiment. Now, you just had the experience of being asked what matters most to you in this first thought exercise. And number two, you've noticed how that made you feel. So I did a little deflection there, redirection there, because I'm going to ask you on the count of 3 to recall that feeling once again, that feeling you had when you tapped into the answer to the question, what matters most? 1, 2, 3. What was that feeling? Cool. This, I think, is one of the key aspects of this particular kind of training that we offer with respect to this wonderful, wonderfully flexible and powerful tool, the what matters most question. Why? Because you can practice, you yourselves, and of course that both end, your clients, your family, your team members, you can practice. You've proved to yourself that you can access and use that feeling. You can get back to that feeling to connect with each of your activities or whatever activity you find yourself doing at the time or task that you're doing at the time. You can get back to that. I'd like to call on a couple of you to perhaps share, if you're willing, your reflections on this experience. We'll just take a few minutes to do that. Let's see. Since there's so many of you, switching to gallery mode, and feel free to pass if you want to. Paula Johnston.
Hello. Hi.
Hi there.
Hi. Which part did you want me to share?
Well, just your reflections. Any reflection that you had on just doing this? Okay. Encountering this question for yourself.
Actually, I love the question because I think it's the internal drive that we have for most things that we do. And for me, it's always my family, and my goal is always to give the people that I work with, that I support, the opportunity to connect with their family in whatever way that is. So that's giving them tools so they can do their job better, so they aren't stressed at work.
Cool, thank you. And Jerry, is it Onelin? Jerry Onelin? You're still muted. Nope, okay.
You put it in the chat. You could put your reflection.
Yeah, but you put it in the chat. Yeah, and that goes for everyone. Thank you, Cynthia. Nathaniel Bernardo, I should know that because I taught at San Bernardino State for a short second.
Basically, what I really want, what came to my mind immediately, was happiness, and connected to a loved one I'm very close to. And when connecting it to work, well, first of all, my feeling was kind of relaxation, because it's not something I focus on, to tell you the truth. So to realize that gave me some calm. To realize that that's actually what I want, not a lot of these other things that are expected. But when I started to connect it to work, I realized, well, this is what my clients want, I think, too. That was my feeling I got, because that's what they do express that to me in so many ways. You know, I mean, I feel like they do, because what they tell me they want are things that would make you happy. So it gave me this kind of feeling of empathy when I kind of came to this realization that this is what I want, this is what other people want, you know, and this is what they express to you when they talk to you. And like you said earlier, it really struck a chord with me. A lot of them, they want things like company. You said bonding, but you know, they ask me to do things with them sometimes. It's not entirely in my job description, but anyway, I know that sometimes they just want to talk and stuff like that too.
Yeah.
And sometimes they want more. You know, they want to go back to their properties and live their lives again. I mean, that's ultimately, and that's, to me, equates to happiness that they're trying to say.
Yeah.
So that was
Thanks,
what I,
Nate.
sure.
Thanks.
Sure.
Rosaria Reyes?
Sorry.
Hi there.
Hi. Can you ask me the specific
Yeah,
question?
just your response, your reflection on kind of going through that
Um,
exercise and what came up maybe?
Well, I think I don't get enough time to like pause and take a deep breath and reassess and just kind of pause in general. So for me, it just gave me like patience, and it was nice to just think and without really doing stuff. So that was good.
Awesome. Thanks, folks. All right, I'm going to be disciplined for once and keep to the time stamping. So I'm going to ask Cynthia to put some docs into the chat. She's already done it. I know we've gotten a ton of comments and responses, so you might want to go back up, or maybe it'll be easier just if she puts those again in there. You'll need to have them on hand before you go into the breakout rooms. This is for later on, but I want you guys to have them. And I'll also ask her to put, for number one, that's the agenda document, because that's got the breakout instructions. And I'll also ask her to put the handout about asking what matters most, the skills handout. And she's got the assumptions, some basic assumptions that you guys can look at later. And while she's doing that, I'd like to highlight what we found to be really proof of the richness and flexibility and power of the what matters most question. And I won't belabor it. Why? Because those of you that have shared verbally and I've glanced at the chat, you've already mentioned like most of these things. Folks can use it with themselves and with their clients. It's a cool, awesome, both and sort of thing. It's a self-reflection tool, as Nathan reminded us. Right. Rosaria, it offers a moment of quiet pause, like who knew, right? Amidst the storm of stressful circumstances in our lives, personal lives, and in working with our clients and even team members that could cause some stress, right? Let alone our own families. It helps us tune inward and connect with what matters most to us. And it helps us connect with our clients, with our family members, our team members. It can help people make choices and take action based on the awareness of the quote unquote answer. Maybe the answer for today, I'm hangry, I'm stressed out, I need rest, I need to find some happiness in my life, connection or something. Whatever that answer was, and whatever time frame for that answer, from that, an awareness of that to an understanding that they can gain from that awareness what sorts of actions they could take to facilitate, to move forward on what matters most. It can help facilitate deeper conversations and connection with family, with clients, others, build rapport, trust, relationships, and most importantly, which is the topic of this workshop with you, our time here with you, it especially is related to trauma-informed care. Most importantly, it's a way to take a moment for ourselves. As devoted as I know all of you are for your particular tasks and careers and opportunities that you're engaging in helping the community right now in this part of your life, it's a quiet pause from that very intensity. That intensity of working with very, very vulnerable folks that you guys work with every day. And what we believe, and I think what the evidence shows, is that as you go, so goes America. That's probably too much. But because your well-being, it really does affect others. One of our trainers said this beautifully, and I'm going to mangle it a little bit, but the gist was, the you that shows up affects how you show up for others. The you that shows up really does affect how you show up for others, and of course, the impact that you can make for others. Now, I'm going to ask Cynthia to, let's stay on track, a little bit over here, to open up a handout overview. And super quick, like in 30 seconds, I just want you to kind of glance at it. You'll see the different steps of the process. This is exactly what you just did in the thought exercise, and Ellen's going to do a little demo. You know, you're going to listen, ask what matters most, listening for openings. Perhaps you're going to interrupt them. You'll use your spidey sense to say, maybe there's something I need to get more intel on that. Speaking slowly. You notice that I gave you guys plenty of time. I paused, I counted silently to myself, because we ramble on and don't let people actually think and actually process, right? Prompting them about how it feels in their body and so on. So that's the handout that you'll be using a little bit later on. And key thing, remember, it's flexible. It looks like a script, it quacks like a script, but really adapt those words in the context of you when you're working with your partner. Okay, great. Ellen, I'm going to turn it over to you for your demo.
Thank you, Pam. And I'm going to ask Carla Denner to be my role play disaster survivor. And we're going to just do a little short experience of, as me as a DCM and Carla as a survivor, how this particular tool might slide into your work with a client. I want to just emphasize a couple of things that were in the considerations, and that is, this is not a simple question always. That when we ask what matters most, it can open up some tough stuff. It may not be that your client can access what matters most at that moment. And so honoring whether it's something right that minute or something broader in their life gives a lot of opportunity to you to be with wherever your client is. And that's what we want to emphasize. So, and we'll encourage you to look at this and ask for some comments afterwards. Critiques, positive, wonderings, whatever comes up for you, we're anxious to explore. So Carla, hi, good to see you again.
Hi.
How's it been going for you?
Oh, I'm just feeling very overwhelmed. It's really been horrible and frustrating. You know, it's been over a year since I lost my house, and there's just been so much to do, and it's been frustrating to get things done.
So we made a little to-do list last time. What have you been focusing on since we last met?
Well, yeah, I had, working on paying the rent and food resources, and you've been helpful with that. Yeah, and I'm just feeling frustrated and overwhelmed with it all. It's just been a lot.
Yeah, well, it's very understandable, of course. Is there anything in specific that you wanted to be sure to get done today in our meeting? Or was it more a general check-in?
I guess just a general check-in. I don't really know what I want to get done. I'm just so overwhelmed with it all. It's just been really horrible year and frustrating, and yeah.
Well, do you mind if we do a quick little exercise? It'll take just a couple of minutes to sort of get us on the same page. Would that be okay with you?
Okay, that sounds fine.
Okay. Well, this will just take a second. So let's get ready and take just a slow, gentle breath to get all grounded here. So take one breath with me if you don't mind. And I heard you talk about how frustrating it is to work in this terrible situation that you find yourself. And so let's do this little exercise.
Because the panic attack involves the breathing. And so then they try to take a.
I'm sorry?
Oh, there was someone off mute.
I fixed it.
They're muted now.
Oh, okay. So I'd like you to, Carla, think for just a minute. What matters most to you in your life? And I'll give you a couple of seconds to think about that, and then we'll talk.
Okay.
What matters most to you? I'm going to take a little time out from this demonstration because I want to share what I'm noticing. So I noticed that Carla's was looking around and her head was kind of moving. And so I initially was going to wait just about 5 seconds, but I waited until she stopped moving. And I don't know if that's going to help at all, but I didn't want to assume she had thought of anything when she's kind of looking around the room. So, okay, back to real time. So Carla, hi. Is something come up for you?
Well, my family matters to me a lot. I have a big family, and they been really close and love them, and they don't all live close by, and it's been during the pandemic. I've been able to see some of them for a while, so I my family, my parents and my kids, and
great.
Yeah.
And so if you think about that and what that family that you notice how you feel in your body when you're thinking about them as what matters most. And if you could just go to that feeling and maybe put a word to it. Does anything come to mind?
I just feel a lot of love and closeness and happiness too when I think about them, because we're all very close.
Love and closeness and happiness. Now, how does that relate? Can you make a connection between that feeling of love and happiness and closeness to the goal of working to get out of your frustration? Can you just in your own way, make a link between those two things?
You froze, Ellen, for a moment.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, am I back?
Yeah, you're back.
Okay.
So
I'm closeness. Can you make a connection in your own mind, however you might do it, between the love and connection for your family and getting out of the frustration that you experience with this fire process?
Well, I'm noticing like my kid has just been really stressed out and you know, I'm feeling so overwhelmed. It's been really hard to support him and
Okay, I'm going to interrupt you.
yeah.
That's a very challenging feeling. I can certainly imagine. Your feeling that you had with the love and support and connection to your family. Can you make a connection between that feeling that you had in your what matters most and your challenges with your dealing with your kid? Is there something that connects the two in your own mind? You don't have to share that even. You just think about how one feeling, your connection to your family, might help you with dealing with your child and their frustration.
Okay.
Anything come to mind that you feel comfortable sharing?
Well, I guess it makes me realize that I haven't been spending enough time focusing on him and doing fun activities and helping him because he's yeah, when you know, it's been a stressful year and we haven't had those like happy times together. So spending more time with him and so it makes me think about that I want to spend more time with him. Yeah.
Well, that's something that I can check back with you later on in terms of taking this feeling of what matters most to you and linking it to something specific, like more time with your child in this very stressful time you're having. So thank you very much. It helps me understand you more and helps me understand how we can work together a little bit more. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Okay. That's a short demo of using that tool. So I'd love to get responses or impressions or feelings one way or the other, because we all learn from sharing with each other. Anybody willing to share a little comment about their reactions to this?
I will. Emily.
Emily, thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
What it made me realize is that very often I find that the feelings that my clients express are things that I either feel at the time in a different way, maybe with a different situation, or I have felt that way before. And when you think about all the things that you have to do when you're trying to survive, it can be so overwhelming. And that to focus on the thing that really is the most important thing kind of makes all those things line up. And often when I talk with my clients, I do understand them, you know, and it makes me reflect on my own priorities in my own life. And in that way, I can help them focus on what they, like the client you were just sharing or talking with, she was saying that it's her son or her child. Even though the other things are so stressful and important, you think about them all day, every day, you know, how to pay the rent and how to get the food and all that kind of stuff. When you help people focus on the things that are really important to them, it helps them put all the other things in sort of a better place. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Makes total sense to me. It's very similar to other feedback we've gotten. The one DCM told us, which I thought was a wonderful encapsulation of it, was I always ask my clients what they need and how I can help. And I realize that that's kind of a job. They have to figure that out. But when I ask them what matters most, they don't have to do any work. They know if I just give them a moment to go there, they know what matters most. So it's a way to start with something known and not a job before we get to all that work. And that was a lovely, I thought, feedback to us about the use of the tool. Thank you very much, Emily.
Thank you.
Anybody else would
Great.
like to share? I see the notes in the chat from Patricia. One more share before we move on. I could call on somebody. Let's see. Who? I don't even know. I don't know. I know Rosie, but who else? I'll just randomly pick Sarah Richards. Sarah Richards, are you there? Did you share anything of your responses?
I'm here, yes. And I was actually, it's an interesting scenario for me. I'm not somebody who works in client services, so I don't interact with people in the way that the majority of you do, I think. But for me, watching this and actually kind of thinking through it on my own side of the things that I answered initially when we were trying it ourselves, I think if I were going through this as a client, that's kind of the position I'm putting myself in thinking about this, that it would allow me to take maybe the fear and the frustration and the irritation around what I'm doing and kind of repackage that as, or refocus my energies to remembering to achieve what I think matters most to me. For me, it was foundation, stability for my family. That's what matters most to me. And so I could see how having all of those details that are never ending and lining up one after the other, and they feel overwhelming. They feel like we'll never get started sometimes on a lot of them because there's just, it seems like they're never ending. And to remember to step back and say each step along that path would get me to what matters most, maybe would give me some space as a client to stand back and say, okay, this isn't something that I have to focus on everything that I'm not doing right now, but remember that each thing I'm doing is helping me towards what matters most. So it might relieve some of the frustration in that way.
Thank you very much. You couldn't have said it better than we do. I'd just like to point out too that you mentioned the frustration and the anxiety and all that, and those are very difficult physiological states to be in. They're really part of the fight or flight physiology, which is very stressful to your body. Whereas when we sit into the what matters place, even for a moment, it's a parasympathetic nervous system. It's a calming nervous system, healing, actually physiologically better for us. So as we have just a few moments in that space, it really can counter a great deal of the negative effects of the stressful feelings. So you touched on several of those. So thank you very much for sharing them as a sort of, I don't like to use the negative, but as a DCM manager or facilitator or something like that, you're certainly in a position to wonder with those that you work with what the effects of these kind of questions might be on your team and on the actual survivors themselves. So thank you very much. I'll give it back to Pam, and thank you, Carla, for your quick adaptation to become a fire survivor.
And I'm going to just ask really quickly to Norma. Norma had a quick response before we go into breakout.
Oh yeah, I just had a quick comment that I feel like it's a really good question to ask survivors what matters most, because sometimes as a DCM you come in with a list of tasks that you want to complete with them, or you just have like an agenda and they're in a different mindset. So I feel like it opens it up to allow the survivor to express what's going on, and then you can kind of reframe the work that you're going to do with them that day.
Thank you. You couldn't again have said it better, because we often talk about those two ways, either starting it to frame the session or interrupting, as I did with Carla, to kind of refocus. So it can be used. I use it with myself all the time, and it's different each time with staff people, with your family. It's just getting used to asking the question. And so practice makes perfect. Thank you, Norma, for your comments. Pam.
Right. Okay, it's ready for a breakout time. I don't know if it's Cynthia who's going to be actually.
Valerie,
Oh, Valerie, yeah, Valerie.
Yeah,
If
so
you
let
could
me,
start,
let me stop the recording.
okay.
Pam, you're muted.
There you go.
Most people are asking me to mute, so it's happy to be asked to unmute. So if you're a reporter, could you use the raised hand function, and I'll call on a few of you to get some responses, and everyone else too. Feel free to put in the chat some of your responses to reactions to this exercise. So I'd like us to take a few moments for you to share your reactions, any insights or general comments. Perhaps ask yourself, what did you just learn about yourself or how you approach your work while you were doing this particular module, or what you might do differently. Maybe in your life might be TMI, but perhaps at work.
Looks like Monica has her hand raised.
Monica, you'll need to unmute. Thanks, Monica.
Yes, hi. So I actually played the role as a client, and something that I have learned is that when Shama was asking me the questions, I just felt like I was valuable. I was like, I matter as a client, like someone really cared what I was going through. And also like it builds that trust with the provider, and you really trust that person, like they're gonna help me get through this, or they're gonna find me resources to help me, you know, fulfill their unmet needs.
Thank you, Monica. Others? Any responses, reactions?
I felt
Nathan.
like, hi there. I felt like what you said about spidey sense. I feel like you do have to use that. You know, you can't just, you have to have an understanding of somebody and not just kind of interrupt them when they're really overwhelmed and expressing how overwhelmed they are, and to kind of find out, you know, is this the right time to kind of bring this, you know, bring this down to some deep breathing first, or the breathing, and then focus in on this. What is it you want? Or
yes, exactly. And if you all notice in the basic assumptions, and also at the beginning of that handout, hello, you've got to at least address their immediate needs, food, shelter. Even if you're not giving them the physical food or an actual new mobile home, they need to know that they've been heard, this really critical stuff. Because are you going into woo-woo land? Seriously, dude? You're asking me this woo-woo meditative stuff when I'm hungry and blah, 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 blah. So at least that has to be acknowledged. And as Ellen pointed out, it can be a scary question. Lord knows the response, crying, anger, who knows what you guys will get. So yeah, absolutely, spidey sense is key. Jesus, make sure you unmute.
Yeah, I was just gonna kind of bounce off that. I think it's just really reading the body language and vibe of your client, and how the conversation is going. For example, me personally, I played the role of the client as well, and I think I would rather hear that question at the beginning and just be very straightforward in addressing needs. But I know that's not always the case for other people. Like I said, you just kind of have to read the vibe in the room and then go from there, just to make them feel as comfortable as possible. Because for some people, it's not easy asking for help and sharing what they need after a disaster.
Yeah, thank you, Jesus.
Hey,
And
Pamela,
Laura,
can I interject real quick to see if my microphone
sure.
is working?
Yay!
Touched me, victory, victory. Okay, yeah, our tech
you
guy
go.
is on the phone. He just fixed it. Okay. Hey, thank you, Tim. Thanks. Sorry to interrupt. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Jerry. Laura Barnes?
Well, that surprised me. I did mostly listening, and I think that's something I noticed about myself. I think it just comes with the territory as a pastor. I'm always reaching and asking input from others, and so we didn't balance our room very well, but I loved meeting my partner.
Awesome. Awesome. And Jerry, now that we have you, do you have something to say?
I do. I'm not muted, am I?
No, you're not.
This one was an easy one for me, and I usually I'm very private, but you know, I believe in for me it's all about the relationship with Jesus and the Lord. And for me, anytime there's anything that goes wrong, my first response is to go to Him, because He is the Holy Spirit takes care of everything in our lives. If we just go to Him, He will always take care of everything that we do. It's a guarantee. It's a lock, you know. And so I think that, you know, because through my family and my boys, He's given me these blessings that has given me such joy in my life. But at the center of it, at the root of it, is our Lord and Savior, the Holy Spirit that lives and dwells in me. And so I mean, I wouldn't have had much to share in the breakout session, because that would have been it. Because to me, it was a real simple answer. Thank you.
Well, that's it entirely. Is no matter what the client or the family member answer is, it's absolutely fundamental to, guess what? Now I know where Jerry's coming from, what's most important to him, and I can help listen. I can listen more carefully, direct my resources, all sorts of stuff. Cool. Awesome. Now, I'd like to offer you on our last few minutes some next steps, ask you if you'd like, and I know you have different roles, so you're going to need to articulate this and figure this out for yourselves with respect to your roles, but to think about a client, perhaps a family member, a team member that you think would respond well to this what matters most question. Or it could be someone you really would appreciate knowing more about. Like you see Jerry, you see Jerry, you see Jerry, and then suddenly, automatically, you get this massive insight to who Jerry is and what matters most. Or Carla and family, and supporting her with her son. So perhaps write that person's initials on the top of your What Matters Most handout, the one that had the kind of scripty chart grid of questions to ask and how to kind of proceed through the question. And consider practicing this with a colleague or friend, maybe just to get more comfortable with asking that question, because that on the speaker side, that could be a little dicey too, right? Asking someone that question, let alone being on the receiving side. I just want to thank all of you again for attending this workshop with us. I am truly enjoyed this. I've truly enjoyed this time. I did see a few old timers, in other words, people that I've seen on prior trainings. And as that song says, make new friends, but keep the old. And so I consider you new friends. Some are silver, the other gold. No shade, I'm just saying. Some of you are newbies to me, and it's been a pleasure meeting all of you. Ellen, do you have any concluding thoughts?
No, I think each of you said what we would say. So your own contributions, as usual, win the day. So thank you all for your attention and your participation, both emotionally and verbally. And I just encourage you to practice it, because it gets easier and easier. It's not so easy at first to bring this question in.
Thanks, Ellen. And Cynthia, I'll turn it over to you to close things out on the Imagine You side, and then we'll pass it off to the La Jefa.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Pam. Thanks, Ellen. Thanks, Carla. Thank you all for participating in this and experiencing our work and giving your feedback and input. And we are happy at any time to speak with any of you about our work and how this might apply to your situation, wherever you're working and in whatever situations you find yourself. So we're so honored to be asked to present here. We'll see the DCMs again. And I'll be setting that up with Shyama and Valerie. And I think I'll turn it back over to Valerie and Shyama.
Well, thank you. And just on my behalf, thank you all for participating. I'm going to pass it over to Shama and Val Mahanovich because this is the Val Shama Val sandwich. We put this together last year. I'll be doing this year. So thank you for being part of our baby test, and pass it over to Shama now.
Thank you. And yes, so I will be coordinating a follow-up with Cynthia. So anyone that's on my DCM, please know that you will get an invite. And if you don't, reach out to your program manager because they will probably be the one to first receive it. Again, thank you all for your time, and thank you for all of our presenters that stayed. Thank you for sharing all of your resources and information. I think it's incredibly helpful for this. I don't really think that when Valerie and I started this last year, we didn't really know what it looked like, but we just kind of knew that it needed to happen. And so I'm just really thankful that we were able to continue this. And thank you to both Valerie Brown and Valerie Mahanovich, as Valerie said, my Valerie sandwich, for helping coordinate this meeting. And, you know, I think I can speak for all of us in the DCM piece when I say that we really appreciate you all and your help in connecting us and our survivors to all of the various networks. So, with that, I don't have anything else. If anyone has any questions, feel free to unmute yourself, speak now, or reach out to us via email. We will be here for you. I know most of you are probably hungry, so I will keep it short there.
Have a great weekend, everybody. Nice to meet all of you.
Bye.